Chapter 932. Yu Qianqiu's body flashed and landed on the rooftop of the World Commerce Association. Yun Peng quickly returned to his original form and landed as well. Both of them didn't look too good, especially Yu Qianqiu, whose mouth was still stained with blood. Wei Chuanqiu quickly sized up the two and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that there was nothing wrong with them. He had also been alarmed by the huge commotion in the distance. At this moment, De Ming Luan flashed over and looked at Yun Peng and Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, "Yun Peng, did you fight with Cangyun Xin?" Yun Peng shook his head with a grave expression. "Fuck. That old bastard is really abnormal. Is he interested in me pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? He actually hit a big killer move." Yu Qianqiu spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva and cursed as he wiped the blood off his mouth. Although Cangyun Xin's earth-shattering attack didn't directly affect him, he was injured by the momentum that shook the heaven and earth. It would have been better if he hadn't spoken, but as soon as he did, Wei Chuanqiu's anger flared up and he yelled at him, "Kid, there's something wrong with your brain. You knew that guy was waiting for a chance to deal with you, but you still dared to run out of hallucinatory Immortal City. You're courting death. It doesn't matter if you die, but don't drag others down with you." Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth but shut it in the end. He wanted to lure Cangyun Xin out by relying on his ability to control the heavenly lightning. Who knew that Cangyun Xin was indeed an expert at the Immortal Emperor stage? His cultivation was simply too powerful. He wasn't someone that Mo Wuji could deal with. He finally understood that with his early minor immortal cultivation, it was better to avoid provoking Immortal Emperor experts in the future. De Ming Luan looked suspiciously at Yu Qianqiu and asked Yun Peng, "Such a big commotion, if it wasn't you fighting Cangyun Xin, could it be him? Or could it be someone else?" Yun Peng was stunned by the question. He thought about it carefully and really didn't know who Cangyun Xin was fighting. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and remained silent. Wei Chuanqiu scratched his head and said, "Is there something you can't tell us?" Yun Peng shook his head and said, "This is really unimaginable. I don't know who he is fighting with, but..." Cangyun Xin's potential exploded at the critical moment. He actually broke through to the intermediate stage of the Immortal Emperor stage in one go and comprehended the Heartless Palace's 3 swords as one sword drawing style in one go. It was precisely because of the formidable power of the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance that he was able to survive. Otherwise he would have definitely died this time. Heartless Palace's 3-in-1 sword drawing style. Great Bright Wheel and Wei Chuanqiu exclaimed at the same time, their faces filled with disbelief. "Not bad." Yun Peng nodded slowly and said, "Absolute heaven, absolute earth, absolute emotion, 3 swords as one sword drawing technique." After a moment of silence, Wei Chuanqiu let out a sigh of relief and exclaimed, "This is really unexpected. Cangyun Xin actually comprehended the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance." The Heartless Palace's position as the #1 sect in the celestial world is becoming more and more stable. Seeing the 3 early-stage Immortal Emperor experts exclaim repeatedly, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, "Could it be that this sword drawing stance is very famous in the celestial world?" Wei Chuanqiu subconsciously replied and sighed, "The Heartless Palace's sword drawing stance is famous in the celestial world. It is the Heartless Palace's ultimate technique." The Heartless Palace relied on this technique to secure their position as the #1 sect in the celestial world. The sword drawing style has 1 absolute heaven, 2 absolute earth, and 3 heartless. Most of the Heartless Palace's disciples would find it extremely difficult to master the first sword, let alone the last 2. It's even more difficult to fuse the 2 sword styles into 1 sword drawing style. In that case, isn't Cangyun Xin's 3-in-1 sword drawing stance the strongest sword drawing stance of the Heartless Palace? Yu Qianqiu asked. "Yes." Wei Chuanqiu said in amazement. Before this, only the sect leader of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, could fuse 3 swords into 1 sword drawing stance. It is said that Wang Qing was a very handsome man, but in order to sever his emotions and desires to fuse 3 swords into 1 sword drawing stance, he killed his wife and children and killed his entire family. In the end, he didn't stop and didn't even let himself off. He actually destroyed his own face. In the end, his hard work paid off and he really mastered the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance. Because of this, most of the other sects in the celestial world became family sections. Only the Heartless Palace is an exception. De Ming Luan nodded slightly, looking at the past and present. Those peerless experts have a mind that is hard to reach. Very few of them would drag their families down with them. These words made Yu Qianqiu sigh. He first thought of his master. Bai Changchun was the same. He pursued the peak of cultivation and didn't care about his family. Yu Qianqiu thought of himself and couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. Suddenly Yunping thought about it and interrupted. If I'm not wrong, Sangyun Xn should be thankful for what happened today. If he wasn't forced into a desperate situation, it would be very difficult for him to break through this shackle and instantly comprehend the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance of the Heartless Palace. I have to say that it's fate. It can be considered his luck. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He gulped with difficulty and said, "You mean that the reason Sangyun Xn was able to comprehend the 3-in-1 sword drawing style was because he was forced to do so by that bolt of lightning? That's just my guess, but I'm pretty sure that's the case." Yunpeng glanced at him and said, "Otherwise, based on the fact that you killed his only grandson, he wouldn't have bothered talking to you in that situation. Once he used the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance, you would have been dead. Why did he have to suffer so much and only draw his sword in the end?" Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. In that case, he had helped Sangyun Xn greatly by not killing him with the heavenly lightning? This matter was Motherf ***. When Yu Qianqiu thought about how Sangyun Xn would use that frightening 3-in-1 sword drawing stance to deal with him in the future, his scalp went numb. One thing was certain. Sangyun Xn would definitely not let him go. He coughed and asked, "Is there any way to defend or break this 3-in-1 sword drawing stance of the Heartless Palace?" The three of them looked at him together and guessed his concerns. Wei Chuanqiu sneered and said, "You want to defend and break it? With your abilities? Let me tell you, try your best to avoid him in the future. Not meeting him is the best way to save your life." De Ming Luan nodded and explained, "Those who have cultivated the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance in the Heartless Palace will carry a few swords that they won't use easily. Absolute Heaven, Absolute Earth, Absolute Emotion 2-in-1 sword drawing stance, and 3-in-1 sword drawing stance basically have a matching sword. Those who have cultivated all 5 sword drawing stances will usually carry 5 swords that they won't use easily. These 5 swords represent the peak sword intents of the user's 5 types and cultivation. It's fine if they're not drawn, but once they're drawn, they'll be earth-shattering. Each sword is stronger than the last, especially the 5th sword that represents the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance. Very few people in the 3 realms can block this move." Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard this. Very few people in the 3 realms can block this move? De Ming Luan nodded and then added, "After the Heartless Palace's sect master, Wang Qing, mastered the 3-in-1 sword drawing stance, other than that time when he was defeated by the Immortal Emperor, he has never had an opponent. It's probably very difficult for anyone in the 13 great immortal monarchs to be able to block Wang Qing's 3-in-1 sword drawing stance. Of course, Sangyun Xn has just mastered it, so there's definitely a big gap between him and Wang Qing. However, at least the 3 of us can't block Sangyun Xn's 3-in-1 sword drawing stance. As for you, there's no need to talk about it." He changed the topic and ignored Yu Qianqiu. He turned to Yunpeng and asked, "What happened just now?" Wei Chuanqiu also looked at him curiously. Yunpeng was silent for a while, then he told them what happened when the thunderbolts attacked Sangyun Xn. After listening to him, De Ming Luan and Wei Chuanqiu felt that it was a little unbelievable. They had never heard of such a strange thing. They couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu in confusion, as if they were asking, "Why did the lightning only target Sangyun Xn, but nothing happened to you at all?" Yu Qianqiu hurriedly shook his head and said, "I don't know what happened either, but there's one thing I'm sure of. Sangyun Xn's rude words angered the heavens, and in the end he was punished by thunderbolts. Many people saw this with their own eyes." De Ming Luan and Wei Chuanqiu looked at Yunpeng in unison. They didn't quite believe this explanation. Yunpeng was speechless. At that time, Sangyun Xn did say to the thunderbolts in the sky that it was only SOSO, but was that really the reason? That was a little too mysterious. Seeing that he couldn't get an answer, De Ming Luan didn't want to stay any longer. After all, because of his identity he couldn't stay for long, so he immediately said goodbye to them and left. Apart from Yunpeng on the rooftop, the other 2 went down to the 22nd floor. In the corridor, Wei Chuanqiu suddenly asked sneakily via voice transmission, "Yu Qianqiu, tell me honestly. Are you related to the heavenly lightning targeting Sangyun Xn?" Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "Why would you have such an idea? Do you think I can control the heavenly lightning?" He did not directly say that he couldn't control it and let the other party think about it himself. Wei Chuanqiu frowned and thought about it, but she also felt that it was unlikely. After the 2 of them split up, Yu Qianqiu returned to Utopia. He first looked for Zhang Peng to ask about the progress of the pill refinement. Qin Feng did not delay, but after all he had limited manpower, and the speed of the refinement was indeed not satisfactory. He paced back and forth in the military camp's conference room for a while before disappearing. In China, the headquarters of the Hong Gang and the Qin Gang were still under the big tree in front of the flat ground halfway up the mountain behind the mountain god temple. Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun were summoned together. Yu Qianzhou looked at the mountain god temple with green smoke curling up from the foot of the mountain. He reached out to touch the rough bark of the big tree and slowly said, "Gu Qingyun, immediately send a group of people overseas to search for the volcanic island. Hong Qi, send someone to pass on my order. Gather all the cultivators in the world who know how to refine pills and gather in the East Holy Land." At first, he did not notice anything unusual in the thick fog, but as he went deeper and deeper, he began to hear the occasional dull sound of something being crushed. There was also the sound of heavy breathing that sounded like bellows, as if some huge animal was walking below. Just as Yu Qianzhou was about to use his divine sense to check what it was, he suddenly discovered that his body, which was moving forward, had come to a halt. After struggling for a moment, he felt as though he had slammed into a large net, and his whole body seemed to have been entangled in the net. *CK. Did someone set a trap here? Yu Qianzhou was shocked. He had been using his divine sense to explore the way. How could there be such a large net lying in front of him without him noticing it? His head approached the place where his body and limbs were entangled, and he immediately found that he was not entangled in a net, but was stuck by a rope net that was as thick as a child's arm. The strange thing was that this rope net was crystal clear and covered with mucus. When his divine sense swept over it, it actually passed through the air as if it was nothing. *CK. What the hell is this? Yu Qianzhou quickly released his divine sense to investigate, and found that he had actually broken into a canyon. This net seemed to be deliberately set up in the canyon to wait for him. Yu Qianzhou struggled hard, but found that the stickiness of this thing was difficult to estimate. Even with his cultivation he couldn't get rid of it. Then, a feeling of numbness began to spread from his skin that was stuck, and the clothes that were stuck on his body began to emit black smoke and rot. Needless to say, this transparent rope net was highly toxic, otherwise it would not be able to corrode his immortal body that he had forged. After a moment of surprise, he suddenly felt a tremor from both ends of the transparent giant rope net. It seemed as though something was quickly climbing over from both ends of the rope net, and was quickly approaching him. Moreover, there was also a heart-palpitating zhi-zhi sound coming from it. It felt as though he was the prey, and there were two things fighting to hunt him. Yu Qianzhou didn't dare to hesitate. His whole body emitted a purple flame, and with a buzz sound he burned a big hole in the middle of the rope net that was stuck to him, and he quickly dodged. He looked at the place where he was stuck just now, but there was a thick fog and he couldn't see anything. He released his divine sense again to investigate, and found that there were two huge arthropods in the air, and they were quickly converging at the center of the canyon. Wind rise. Yu Qianzhou let out a light shout, and held a ball of purple fire in each of his palms. A gust of wind immediately rose in the canyon, and the thick fog that pervaded the surroundings was quickly dispersed. The dim canyon immediately revealed its true appearance. Yu Qianzhou's eyes gradually widened as he looked ahead, and he seemed to be in disbelief. This was a large canyon that was 100 meters wide and hundreds of meters high. Although the canyon was wide enough, it still gave people a feeling of a thin line of sky when they looked up. On both sides of the dark mountain rocks, there were all kinds of colorful arthropods attached to them. Their bodies were either huge or growing steadily. Not to mention their huge bodies, they were all covered in hard armor. If they curled up and didn't move, just using divine sense to investigate would probably cause people to mistake them for rocks. No wonder when he used his divine sense to investigate the canyon on both sides, he didn't discover them. Following the use of the purple fire energy to create a gust of wind that whistled through the canyon, pairs of tentacles began to extend from the craggy mountain rocks. Disgusting worms that were as large as worms crawled out from all over the place. These pink worms were covered in mucus, expanding their disgusting circular mouths and making shio-shio sounds against the wind, as if they were hungry and wanted to eat. A circle of ferocious fangs constantly opened and retracted inside their circular mouths, and mucus like mucus slid down from their mouths. It was a horrifying sight to behold. At the bottom of the canyon, there were dense white bones everywhere. There was no lack of human bones, but most of them were the corpses of various animals. Some of the bones had already turned yellow and black, and some of them were already covered in a layer of moss. It was obvious that they had existed here for many years. It was unknown how many corpses and bones had accumulated in the canyon over the countless years. Some strange animals climbed on top of the various skeletons, constantly sniffing, as if they wanted to find some scattered meat on the skeletons to fill their stomachs. Yu Qianqiu frowned. He never thought that there would be such a disgusting place in the ruins of God. His gaze then landed on the large net in the middle of the canyon. Although he had burned a large hole in the middle, it did not affect his ability to recognize its full appearance. It was actually a giant spider web. Two big, fluffy, colorful spiders with a body size of 5 to 6 meters crawled to the gap in the broken web. After looking around with their big black eyes, they didn't find any prey. Then they quickly spat out crystal-clear spider silk that was as thick as a child's arm, quickly repairing the damaged area. Whoosh! A ray of multicolored light flew out from Yu Qianqiu's hand and slashed at the spider web. A strand of spider silk was suddenly stretched out, and then it quickly bounced back. A flying sword was stuck on it, swaying. The two large spiders vigilantly stopped spitting silk and suddenly turned around at the same time. Their huge bodies climbed on the spider web as if they were flying, quickly rushing to the source of the earthquake. The two big fellows probably thought that they had caught their prey. The large spider that was closer naturally had the advantage of being in a favorable position. It was the first to reveal two light golden curved sharp teeth that were as long as a child's arm. He quickly clamped onto the flying sword and chewed it happily. With a ding sound, the flying sword was immediately broken into two pieces. It seemed to realize that it was not the food it had imagined, so it turned around and gave up. The flying sword that had been broken into two pieces swayed on the spider web. The spider that caught up with it pounced on the flying sword and chewed on it. With a ding, it similarly broke the flying sword into two pieces. It shook its head disinterestedly and turned around to continue mending the spider web. Yu Qianqiu, who had his eyes on the spider web and wanted to test its toughness, did not expect to see such a scene. He immediately let out a breath of cold air. The quality of the flying sword was not bad. It was given to him by Hui Yunlong, but he did not expect it to be bitten into two by the spider in just 2 bites. Oh my! What kind of spider is this? Its jaws are so powerful, and the spider silk it spits out is also extraordinarily tough. Even a flying sword can't cut it. Yu Qianqiu mumbled to himself. His eyes gradually brightened. He quickly took out the jade archive and found the one with the records of the various beasts. In the end, even after going through it a few times, he could not find the original form of the spider in front of him. This made him even more astonished. Logically speaking, such a powerful spider could not possibly be a nobody. Why was there no record of it in this jade archive? Could it be a new species? He looked at his surroundings. If he had not accidentally stumbled into this place, he probably would not have been able to discover them. He wondered how many years these fellows had lived in this place. Yu Qianqiu looked around and found that there were only 2 of these spiders in the entire valley. His gaze fell on the spider web. He felt that it should be of great use, but he did not know how to collect it. He then looked at the pale golden jaws of the 2 spiders. He felt that they should be of great use as well. Just as Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and a purple flame flying sword materialized, ready to slaughter the 2 spiders and pry out their jaws, he saw that the 2 spiders had already mended the spider web. Their heads arched together for a while, then they crawled to the other end of the spider web together. Chapter 934. As soon as the 2 spiders climbed up the craggy mountain wall, the arthropods and ugly worms around them quickly retreated, as if they were extremely afraid of the 2 spiders. Those that could hide in the cracks on the mountain wall all shrank back. However, the 2 fellows suddenly seemed to have gone mad. Their 4 pairs of slender limbs quickly waved and rushed into the retreating swarm of worms. The 4 pairs of limbs were like the scythes of the Grim Reaper, madly waving about and slaughtering. The 8 sharp limbs stabbed in and killed one worm after another. The 2 fellows were like tigers that had entered a flock of sheep, wantonly slaughtering. They didn't know what was wrong with them, but it seemed like they hadn't offended them at all. However, even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, let alone these evil creatures that lived here. A group of centipede-like, dark red, 1-meter-long multi-legged reptiles that were much larger than the centipedes launched a frenzied counterattack, engulfing them like a tidal wave. For a moment, all kinds of ear-piercing screeches sounded from the mountain wall. The entire mountain wall was in chaos. Yu Qianqiu put away the purple flame flying sword, but still protected himself with purple flames. He watched the fierce battle between these worms with interest. This kind of scene was rare. He wanted to see if the 2 spiders could win against these tens of thousands of centipede-like worms. The situation was obvious. Since the 2 spiders dared to start a war, they were clearly very confident and didn't fear these pseudo-centipedes at all. They waved their 8 sharp limbs and quickly killed their way out of the heavy encirclement. With a casual wave of their limbs, several worms fell to the bottom of the valley. Meanwhile, an animal that looked like a mouse would immediately crawl out from the bottom of the valley and quickly eat the worms that fell. Although the tens of thousands of worms were brave, it seemed like they couldn't bite through the carapace of the two spiders. Just like that, groups of worms were beaten to the bottom of the valley. Not long after, more than half of them were dead or injured. These worms clearly knew that this couldn't go on for long, so they quickly retreated in defeat and fled in all directions. The two large spiders also stopped their chase. Their abdomens each spat out a strand of spider silk towards the rock. With a whoosh, they dropped down to the bottom of the valley. Those animals that looked like mice immediately fled, obviously very afraid of them. As soon as the two large spiders landed on the ground, they immediately waved their 8 large limbs and pierced through the pile of reptile corpses. Not long after, their 8 limbs were filled with reptile corpses like roasted lamb skewers. In the end, the two of them carried a large amount of prey and crawled to a bend at the bottom of the canyon before disappearing. Could it be that there's a nest down there and they're returning to their nest? Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself. He rubbed his chin and hesitated for a while before he flew towards the bottom of the valley. He went around the corner and found the reason why they had disappeared. There was a cave with a diameter of more than 10 meters on the stone wall. There were many scratches on the entrance of the cave, which were obviously left by the two spiders. At the bottom of the valley, piles of bones piled up, and a foul stench wafted out of the cave. Yu Qianqiu listened at the entrance of the cave for a while. In the end, he couldn't help but quietly float in. It couldn't be helped, he had always been too curious. There weren't any obstructions in the cave and it was very spacious. It was probably because of the spiders going in and out, but the winding passageway was a little too dark. At this time, Yu Qianqiu didn't have the mood to use the purple flames to control the wind outside. The canyon outside the cave was filled with thick fog after a while. After walking along the passageway of the cave for about a kilometer, there was a faint phosphorescent light in front of him. Specks of phosphorescent light appeared on the walls of the cave. The deeper he went, the brighter the light became. In the end, he could already see things normally. Suddenly, a creaking sound like metal rubbing against each other came from the end of the cave. From it, one could hear a kind of irritable emotion which was obviously coming from an animal. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled and then he sped up and flew over. Not long after, he saw the end of the cave. Before he understood the situation, he didn't dare to expose himself. His whole body quietly entered the cave wall. After passing through the mountain to an advantageous position, he poked a small hole in the wall and squinted his eyes to peek inside. At the end of the cave was a huge space. It was like an inverted spindle in the belly of the mountain. There were many huge stalagmites hanging upside down. In the center of the largest stalagmites, there was a huge spider web with a diameter of several hundred meters. However, there was nothing on it. There was a spider silk hanging down from the spider web. Yu Qianqiu adjusted his vision and followed the spider silk to look at the place where the violent noise was coming from. In the end, he didn't know if he didn't look, but after he got a clear look, he was immediately alarmed. He saw a giant spider about 10 meters in size waving its legs, kicking the reptile corpses that the two spiders had brought over. It was unknown if it was dissatisfied with the food or if it was sick of it. Not only was this giant spider bigger than the two spiders he had seen before, but its body was also light gold in color, especially its 4 pairs of limbs, which were like golden spears. The pair of jaws on its mouth was a mixture of red and gold, and there was a faint glow flowing on them. It was not like the two spiders with colorful and furry bodies. Its carapace was bright and clean. If one did not pay attention, they would almost be mistaken for a crab. At this moment, the Spider King suddenly used its hind legs to prop up its body. Its abdomen was covered with densely packed balls. Each of them was the size of a fist, and there were probably more than 1,000 of them. They were glistening yellow and clean. Suddenly, it used its 2 front legs to pluck a yellow ball from its abdomen and raised it up. Yu Qianqiu could vaguely see the shape of a small spider inside the yellow ball. Needless to say, it was definitely a spider egg. However, what surprised Yu Qianqiu was that the Spider King actually stuffed the spider egg into its mouth and chewed it. It seemed to be eating it with relish, and when one was not enough, it plucked another one and stuffed it into its mouth. Just like that, it ate more than a dozen. It actually ate its own eggs. It really was a heartless beast. Yu Qianqiu's expression could not help but twitch. He was not the only one who could not stand it anymore. The 2 colorful spiders also surrounded the Spider King and let out a sorrowful squeak, as if they wanted to stop the Spider King from doing this. After eating more than a dozen spider eggs, the Spider King was finally satisfied. It propped its upper body up and lay back on the ground. The two colorful spiders immediately stabbed the scattered reptile corpses and piled them in front of the Spider King. The Spider King looked a little disinterested as it slowly swallowed the reptile corpses in front of it. It did not seem to be to its liking. After eating, it waved its front legs impatiently and chased the two big spiders away. Then the Spider King turned around and pulled on the spider silk hanging in the air, slowly climbing up the spider web. Just as it was about to climb to the top of the spider web, its careless gaze suddenly paused, and its huge body also stopped moving in the air. Its gaze found a small hole in the mountain wall, and its gaze met with the gaze of the person inside. Yuchencho was startled. He seemed to see a trace of a smile in the other's eyes. The spider is smiling at me? Then he thought to himself, oh no. He had been discovered. He did not know if this Spider King was strong or if he could handle it. But when he thought that he could escape at any time, he calmed down and looked outside. Then he was stunned again. He saw that the huge silhouette had disappeared from the spider web. Instead, a net bed had appeared on the spider web, and a beautiful woman in flowery clothes was lying on it. She was looking at him with a smile. It's been a long time since I had a guest in my cave abode. I wonder which esteemed guest has arrived? Why don't you come out and meet me? The woman in flowery clothes said with a smile. Damn. This savage beast could already assume human form. Yuchencho checked the other party's cultivation and found that she was only at the early stage minor immortal stage, about the same as him. Immediately he felt more at ease. The wall in front of him melted away and Yuchencho walked in openly. Ah, you are human? The woman in flowery clothes who was lying on her side sat up from the net bed in surprise. Then she floated down and circled around Yuchencho to size him up. There was a look of disbelief on her face. Of course I am human. This question made Yuchencho feel depressed. However, from the other party's point of view, they were not the same kind, so it was understandable for her to ask such a question. Yuchencho remained vigilant as he sized up the other party. The woman in flowery clothes had a fair and clean face. Her appearance was also very beautiful, and she had the temperament of a noble lady. However, the most conspicuous thing was her belly, which was bulging and looked like she was about to give birth after 10 months of pregnancy. However, when he thought of the scene of her eating his child, Yuchencho suddenly felt nauseous. After circling a few times, the woman in flowery clothes rubbed her big belly with both hands and stopped in front of Yuchencho. She frowned and said, "That's strange. How can a human enter the divine ruin realm now? Logically speaking, it should be 100 years later. Could it be that you didn't get out in time when the divine ruin realm closed last time?" Yuchencho made a non-committal sound. The woman in flowery clothes immediately clicked her tongue in surprise and said, "So you have some ability. Otherwise, how could you have survived until now with your early-stage minor immortal cultivation? I wonder why you called me out?" Yuchencho asked indifferently. Yo. The woman in flowery clothes felt that it was somewhat inconceivable and said, "You trespassed into my cave abode and now you're in the right. If there's nothing else, I won't accompany you. Goodbye." Yuchencho flashed and flew out of the cave, too lazy to pay attention to her. "Stop, do you think my place is a place where you can come and go as you please?" The woman in flowery clothes immediately sneered and said, "I haven't eaten human flesh for a long time. It's a good change of taste." Then she spread her arms and a white light flashed out from her sleeves. A dense spider web instantly spread out and covered most of the cave abode, trapping Yuchencho inside. The woman in flowery clothes pulled the other end of the rope net and sneered, "Now that you've fallen into my net, let's see where you can escape." Just as she was about to pull Yuchencho over, she saw that his body suddenly emitted a purple flame, burning the rope net that trapped him into ashes on the spot. Chapter 935. "Stop, do you think this is a place where you can come and go as you please?" The woman immediately sneered, "I haven't eaten human flesh for a long time, it's time for a change of taste." Then he spread his arms and a white light quickly flashed out from his sleeves. A dense spider web instantly spread out and enveloped most of the cave, trapping Yuchencho on the spot. The woman pulled the other end of the rope net and sneered, "Now that you've fallen into my net, let's see where you can escape." Just as he was about to drag Yuchencho over, he saw a purple flame suddenly erupt from the other party's body, burning the rope net that trapped him to ashes on the spot. "Purple flame!" The woman cried out involuntarily. Her spider clan was most afraid of fire, especially the spider silk that spiders spit out. Raging fire was the natural nemesis of spider silk, and it would usually burn when it encountered fire. Of course, for a spider demon like her, ordinary raging fire naturally couldn't do anything to her, but now she saw the purple flame of the supreme flame. How could she not be afraid when her nemesis was in front of her? Even in her dreams, she had never thought that she would meet someone who could control the purple flame when she acted rashly. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air, his whole body burning with purple flames. He slowly turned around and stared at her coldly. Although you're a spider demon, I've never killed a pregnant woman. I originally wanted to spare your life, but who knew that you wouldn't know what's good for you? You're courting death, don't blame me. Feeling the pressure of the purple flame, the woman's limbs immediately became weak. Her expression was somewhat bitter as she cupped her hands and said, Your Excellency, I've been presumptuous. Please, for the sake of the child in my stomach, temporarily stop and listen to my explanation. For the sake of the child in your stomach? How dare you say such words? Yu Qianqiu immediately flew into a rage and said, Do you think I didn't see what you ate earlier? I know what you saw, but there's something you don't know. The woman smiled bitterly. Even if I don't eat them, they won't be able to survive. I can't explain this to you in a short time, and you don't have the patience to listen to me slowly. I just want to tell you that I'm the only female spider left among the temple rainbow spiders. If I die, my race will be in danger of going extinct. I hope your excellency can show mercy. Once Yu Qianqiu became angry, he was definitely a ruthless person. But after hearing her words, he couldn't help but ask, Temple rainbow spider? What temple? If it wasn't for the child in my stomach, I wouldn't be easily threatened even though you have the purple flames. The flowery-clothed woman first confessed, then explained, This divine ruin realm was originally created by the phoenix god, and there is a phoenix temple in the divine ruin realm. The ancestors of our rainbow spider were originally spiders who cultivated under the eaves of the temple. Later on, for some unknown reason, the phoenix god expelled all the living beings from the temple and sealed the phoenix temple. Since then, the divine ruins realm has never seen the figure of the phoenix god again. After countless years, due to various reasons, our rainbow spider race has been declining day by day, and I am the only female spider left, so I hope that your excellency can show mercy. Phoenix god? Phoenix? Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled, and could not help but think of the crow on Wu Lishua's shoulder that claimed to be a phoenix. He paused for a moment and said, You mean there is a sealed temple called the Phoenix Temple in the Divine Ruins realm? Exactly. The flowery-clothed woman nodded. She could already feel that the killing intent on Yu Qianqiu's body had subsided, and could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Temple. I wonder what's in the temple. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Where is the temple located in the Divine Ruins realm? As long as you tell me, I can spare your life. I don't want to lie to you. The flowery-clothed woman muttered to herself, I've only heard the story of the phoenix god sealing the temple. As for where the temple is sealed in the Divine Ruins realm, I don't think anyone can find it. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, Saying so much is equivalent to not saying anything. You're not lying to me, are you? There are many dangerous places in the Divine Ruins realm. If I really wanted to lie to you, I could have casually pointed out a dangerous place for you to die. Why would I need to do this? The flowery-clothed woman replied. After going around in a circle, it was equivalent to saying nothing. Yu Qianqiu's gaze was slightly cold, and the killing intent in his heart rose again. He wanted to strip the spider demon of anything useful, but looking at her protruding stomach, he did not harden his heart to make a move. It would have been fine if she was in her spider form, but she had transformed into a pregnant woman in human form. My name is Yu Qianqiu, what's your name? Yu Qianqiu coughed and asked. When the flowery-clothed woman saw him ask such a question, she knew that the possibility of making a move was not high. The danger had passed, so she replied with a smile, My name is Kai Feng. Yu Qianqiu looked at her smiling face, which was like a flower. She did not look like the spider demon that had just devoured his child. He could not help but feel a little depressed, wondering if he was too soft-hearted. He frowned and said, Kai Feng, let me ask you, why is the Divine Ruins realm always covered in fog? Kai Feng was startled, then suddenly smiled sweetly and said, The fog is only within a certain distance from the exit of the Divine Ruins realm. After passing through the canyon outside, you will naturally not be able to see the white fog that does not dissipate all year round. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to ask more, but he suddenly received a summons from Zhang Peng in Utopia. It seemed that the things he had asked Zhang Peng to prepare before coming to the Divine Ruins realm had already been prepared. After thinking for a while, he thought that it would not be long before he returned, so he said to Kai Feng, I have something to do, so I'll take my leave for now. I'll disturb you another day. Anytime. Kai Feng smiled and watched as Yu Qianqiu turned into a stream of light and flashed out of the cave, on a remote island, Zhang Peng had already brought a large amount of immortal herbs to wait for him. There was no other reason than the quality of the immortal pills refined by Qin Feng, and the others was far inferior to the ones refined by him. He was afraid that something would happen to the Utopia army after consuming them. After all, they were his direct subordinates, so he decided to personally refine a batch for the Utopia army. On the island, Zhang Ping used the earth mantra to clear a large piece of hard and flat land. Yu Qianqiu stood in the middle, his palms burning with a light green pillar of fire that was 1,000 feet tall. Zhang Ping circled and danced around the light green pillar of fire. He wore a storage bracelet that his master had given him on each of his wrists, and he kept throwing immortal herbs from the storage bracelet into the rising and burning light green pillar of fire. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and calmly refined the immortal pills. In the fire pillars supported by his palms, 200 layers of pills were being refined at the same time. This scene of pill refinement shocked Zhang Peng. This was equivalent to a person refining 400 cauldrons of pills at the same time. One person was equivalent to 400 alchemy experts. Yu Qianqiu did not need to worry about the rest. He only needed to focus on refining, and Zhang Peng would handle the rest. Zhang Peng continued to fly around the pillar of fire. Whenever an immortal pill popped out from a certain level, he would immediately rush over to collect it into his storage bracelet. Then he would take out an immortal herb from another storage bracelet and place it into the empty space. Master and disciple worked together without any distractions. Furnace after furnace of immortal pills were produced almost continuously, and the refining efficiency was very high. Half a month later, 50,000 restriction-breaking pills, 10,000 marrow-cleansing pills, and 10,000 immortal ascension pills were refined. After continuously refining for half a month, both master and disciple were somewhat exhausted. Zhang Peng held the storage bracelet filled with immortal pills and offered it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "I won't be personally handling this matter. Just as I instructed, you will be in charge. Gather the army and get everyone to bring everything that can be used or taken away from the camp. Then bring them here." Having said that, he looked around and continued, "Let everyone forge their immortal physiques in one go. After this, I will take everyone to another place for a period of training so that the army's strength can be improved as soon as possible." Zhang Ping paused and asked, "Should we inform Mistress and the others to come as well?" "There's no need." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "Just gather the army, don't inform the others. We're just going to train, it's not like we won't come back. This is our rear, we're just leaving for a while." "Understood." Zhang Peng cupped his hands and flew away. Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged on the ground to recover his spirit. After recovering, he flew to the main peak of the island and hid there, waiting for Zhang Peng to bring the army. He did this because there were some things that he couldn't let too many people know for now. In less than a day, Zhang Peng had brought nearly 10,000 well-prepared people to the island. In reality, there were only about 9,000 people in total. Zhang Peng had been briefed beforehand, so he knew what to do. He distributed the refined pills according to the number of people. All of the team members were well-trained and obedient. No one would be long-winded. After Zhang Peng explained everything clearly, he gave the order, and everyone immediately followed the steps unconditionally. More than 9,000 people sat cross-legged in a formation and began to consume pills to increase their cultivation levels. The painful process was naturally the same as that of the soldier in Utopia's conference room. Almost 10,000 people endured it step by step until they consumed immortal ascension pills to increase their cultivation levels to the immortal realm. No matter how disciplined they were, they couldn't help but feel excited. As Zhang Peng had to take charge of the situation, he didn't consume pills to increase his cultivation level. When he saw that everyone had achieved their goal, he couldn't help but look around in excitement. He couldn't help but doubt his master's words about using the heavenly lightning to forge an immortal body. The sky was clear and sunny. How could there be the possibility of heavenly lightning descending? Almost 10,000 people who were told about the process of forging an immortal body also looked around, deeply doubting whether there would be heavenly lightning descending. Just as everyone was feeling puzzled, a strong gust of wind blew, and the sea outside the island suddenly became turbulent. In the blink of an eye, the world turned dark. Dark clouds started to gather in the sky above. Following a thunderous explosion in the sky, electric snakes flashed through the clouds. Chapter 936. Not long after, the island had already turned dark. Only the flashes of lightning illuminated the tens of thousands of dumbfounded men sitting cross-legged on the ground, naked from head to toe. Rumble! The rolling lightning reverberated in the dark clouds. Enough energy had been accumulated. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding on the mountain peak, looked down from the sky and transmitted his voice, "Zhang Peng, tell them to get ready." Zhang Peng immediately came back to his senses. He looked at the tens of thousands of team members sitting cross-legged in front of him, raised his right arm and shouted, "Get ready!" As soon as he gave the order, everyone immediately focused and closed their eyes. At this moment, countless lightning snakes crackled and tangled in the dark clouds above. Zhang Ping raised his head and his vision blurred. He saw tens of thousands of bright lightning bolts coming down with a swoosh, and they corresponded to each team member's body. Tens of thousands of dazzling green and white lightning bolts connected the sky and the earth, twisting and twisting in the air. One end was tied to the dark clouds, and the other end was tied to each team member's body. It was as if countless heavenly ropes were thrown down from the sky. It was a spectacular sight. At first, the team members trembled, but when they realized that the destructive power of the lightning was controlled just right, they all calmed down and focused on using the miraculous reaction between the lightning and celestial core power to slowly improve their physical bodies. Dazzling green and white circles of lightning could be seen moving up and down their bodies. Zhang Peng looked at the spectacular scene in front of him, and his heart was filled with emotion. He admired his master's miraculous methods. He didn't expect his master to be able to summon the sky full of lightning and control it in the palm of his hand. The weight of Yu Qianqiu in his heart became heavier, and he became more and more respectful. Just as he was feeling emotional, he suddenly realized that there was one more person beside him. It was none other than Hong Qi. The smile on Hong Qi's face froze, and his eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at the spectacular scene in front of him. "Zhang Peng, I'll watch over here, you guys can start too." Yu Qianqiu's voice rang in their ears, and the two of them did not dare to hesitate and immediately started to carry out his orders. Zhang Peng gave the required pills to Hong Qi, and the two of them sat cross-legged in front of the crowd, swallowed the pills and circulated them. After the two were baptized by the lightning and forged their immortal physiques, they opened their eyes and saw nearly 10,000 eyes full of joy. Obviously, they had forged their immortal physiques before them. However, he was still sitting cross-legged on the ground naked like the two of them. Before receiving any orders, they had been sitting there waiting. This was the result of years of training. The dark clouds in the sky began to dissipate, revealing the clear blue sky once again. Yu Qianqiu, who was at the peak of the mountain, looked down with satisfaction. This was a truly powerful army. This was the kind of army he wanted. As an army, they could think of ways to make up for the lack of cultivation, but if they lost their essence, qi and spirit, then there was no need to nurture them. "Stand up. Dress up." Following Zhang Peng's command, nearly 10,000 people stood up in unison. They quickly picked up the storage pouches on the ground, took out their clothes and put them on. After putting on their clothes, they stood still like javelins. This scene made Hong Qi very envious. Although this army did not have as many people as his Hong gang, they were much stronger than the motley crew that was restricted by the gang rules. Close to 10,000 people, all of them at the immortal realm, and all of them were obedient, not afraid of sacrificing themselves. They would attack wherever they were pointed. Hong Qi looked around the crowd a few times, but he didn't see Guan Yu. He immediately understood that his master had already used the method of boiling a frog in warm water to slowly pass the command of this army to his junior brother Zhang Peng. It was obvious that the people his master trusted the most were still the two of them. While he felt proud, he could not help but smack his lips and look at Zhang Peng with great envy. Although he had a lot more freedom outside, if his master agreed, he would not hesitate to change positions with Zhang Peng. This was because it was too tiring to fight with people outside every day, and it was not as satisfying as leading this army. However, he also knew that in terms of leading troops to war, he could not compare to Zhang Peng, who was a fierce general who had been through many battles in the human world. This was also the main reason why his master had handed Utopia's army to Zhang Peng. If his junior brother, Zhang Peng, did not have the ability, even if he was his master's disciple, his master would not have handed this army to him. There was no doubt about this. On the flat ground at the foot of the mountain, aside from Hong Qi, everyone else, starting from Zhang Peng, stood there with their heads high and chests puffed out, not moving at all. Yu Qianqiu walked out from his hiding spot at the top of the mountain. He sat on a rock and looked at the army below silently, feeling very emotional. This elite army had been forged with years of blood, sweat, and tears. It was also accumulated bit by bit over time, and they already had a highly unified army soul with a will as strong as steel. Even if one of them died in this army, it would be a huge loss. However, the value of an army's existence was war and killing, but there would always be sacrifices in war and killing, which meant that the army would continue to lose members. Moreover, with their strength, the human world had already lost the right to be their battlefield. Their battlefield would be at a higher level in the near future, like the celestial realm or the netherworld. However, compared to the celestial realm and the netherworld, their strength was too weak, which meant that they would have to sacrifice even more. Yuchencho's gaze was cast to the depths of the sea at some point in time. After some thought, he suddenly stood up and looked down with a determined gaze. He thought to himself, "I'll do my best to increase your cultivation level and give you the best equipment so that you can face the cruelest baptism of war. I'll turn you into my iron-blooded trump cards." With a flash, Yuchencho suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Previously, he didn't want everyone to know that he was related to the lightning that filled the sky just now, but after some observation he had full confidence in this army. This was an army that was worthy of his trust. Yuchencho's sudden appearance didn't cause any movement in the group. Everyone continued to look straight ahead without blinking. After going through Zhang Peng's training, this army had already shed the last layer of ostentatiousness. It was no longer like before when they would eagerly call Yuchencho leader when they saw him. In the army, all of their actions were under the command of the army. Salute. Zhang Peng gave the order and took the lead to salute. Nearly 10,000 people simultaneously saluted Yuchencho in unison. This kind of military salute was plagiarized by Yuchencho from his previous life. Although it looked a little disgusting and awkward, Yuchencho felt that it was slightly more comfortable than kneeling, cupping one's hands and bending one's waist, so he made do with it. When Hong Chi saw the sonorous scene of the iron-blooded army, he felt an itch in his heart again. Yuchencho nodded at everyone with satisfaction. Zhang Ping then gave the order, and everyone returned to their original position. Suddenly Yuchencho spread out his arms and quickly enveloped everyone with his divine sense. In the blink of an eye, everyone disappeared on the spot. Only Hong Chi was left at the side looking around. He asked curiously, "Master, where did they go?" "Worry about your own matters." Yuchencho waved his hand and sent him back. He then disappeared as well. Within the ruins of God, the moment Yuchencho appeared in the valley where he had met Shui Mingqing, he saw that the army that had been sent in advance was already spread out in a state of alert. He immediately took out a large pile of illustrations and jade archives and handed them to Zhang Peng, who was beside him. He instructed, "This is the place where everyone will train. Find a favorable terrain to set up camp and prepare for long-term training. Make sure everyone has time to study these things. I'll go scout out the situation first." After giving some simple instructions, he disappeared again. In that disgusting canyon, Yuchencho appeared in the spider's cave. He looked left and right, then dashed into the depths of the cave in a flash. Unexpectedly, he didn't fly far before he saw an encrypted spider web sealing off the passage. The web was too small, so it was impossible to drill through it. Yuchencho frowned. His body ignited with purple flames, and with a whoosh, he pierced a hole in the spider web. In the large space deep within the cave, the huge spider crawling on the giant spider web flashed with a red light, and turned back into that beautiful pregnant woman. Just as she floated down to the ground, Yuchencho had already flashed into the cave abode. He stood in front of her and asked indifferently, "Why did you seal the passage into the cave?" Kai Feng smiled and said, "Please don't misunderstand, Mr. Yu. I was afraid that Mr. would suddenly visit and not be used to seeing me in my original form, so I set up a communication network. As long as someone breaks through the network and enters, I will immediately know and make preparations in advance." Then she immediately changed the topic and said, "May I know why Mr. Yu has returned this time? Can I trust you?" Yuchencho suddenly asked. The big-bellied Kai Feng was startled. She paused and said, "With Mr.'s discerning eyes, can't you see that I have no ill intentions? As for whether you believe me or not, even if I say everything I can, I'm afraid it will be difficult to convince Mr. to completely believe me. Trust is a process that can withstand the test of time. I wonder if I'm right?" Yuchencho looked at her in a different light and said, "I couldn't tell, but a spider demon like you is quite knowledgeable about the ways of the world. In the ruins of God, demons are humans. In our eyes, the people who barge in are demons." Kai Feng rubbed her big belly and said with a smile, "Since I have a name, don't you think it's more appropriate to call me by my name? There's no need to keep talking about spider demons." "In that case I was rude." Yuchencho looked at her belly and said with a faint smile, "Then I'll call you Madame Kai Feng from now on. Of course this is on the basis that I trust you. If I find that you're not trustworthy..." Yuchencho walked behind her and gently extended his hand from her waist to touch her big belly. He smiled and said in her ear, then I'll kill you and the child in your stomach. I'll make your temple rainbow spider bloodline completely extinct. Chapter 937. Although these words were spoken with a smile on his face, Kai Feng could still hear a bone-chilling coldness in his words, and she couldn't help but shiver slightly. She pretended to twist her waist in discomfort and avoided his hand. She turned to look at him with a smile as she said, "Sir, there is no need for you to threaten this servant. You and I have a cooperative relationship to begin with, so this kind of threat is somewhat unreasonable." Cooperative relationship? Yu Qianqiu snorted. When have we ever cooperated? Kai Feng raised her hand to adjust the golden bone hairpin on her head and shook her head with a smile. We haven't cooperated before, but that doesn't mean we won't cooperate in the future. Besides, the fact that Mr. can come back here and talk to me is already very clear. Mister, you wouldn't come here just to threaten me, would you? Why don't you be honest with me? Otherwise, how will I be able to ask for your help later? Yu Qianqiu realized that this spider spirit was not as simple as she seemed. He immediately raised his eyebrows and snorted coldly, "You're very considerate. But what do you want from me?" "I'm not in a hurry." Kai Feng rubbed her round belly and smiled. "Mister, you've come again. What can I do for you?" What a smart lady, Kai Feng. Are you trying to figure me out first? Yu Qianqiu shook his head. "I don't have anything. I just want to ask you why you ate your own offspring last time. I've been very confused about it. Since Mister is unwilling to tell me, I won't force you. I'll tell you first." Kai Feng sighed faintly. "Actually, this has something to do with what I asked you to help me with. It's not that I want to eat my own flesh and blood, but even if they are born, I won't be able to protect them all. I'm afraid they won't live long. Instead of letting others kill them and feel sorry for them, I'd rather eat them and help their brothers and sisters hatch faster." "From what you said, you seem to have some enemies." Yu Qianqiu asked calmly. "Mister's very wise." Little Phoenix sighed and said, "On the great flaming mountain thousands of miles away from here, there's a group of giant strength fire apes. I don't know when they started to like forging strange things. Because our temple rainbow spider's shells are naturally hard and our claws are naturally sharp, we are their favorite targets. After so many years, our divine temple rainbow spiders have been almost completely exterminated by them. Only me and the two male spiders outside are left. It's so miserable, woo-woo." Yu Qianqiu saw that she started to cry as she spoke, and she was crying so miserably that it didn't seem like she was lying. He frowned and said, "You mean that group of giant strength fire apes killed you and used your claws and shells to forge things?" On the surface he looked sympathetic, but in his heart he was muttering, "Not to mention others, even I want to peel off your claws and carapace." Although he thought so, it was not easy for him to meet a demon that could speak in the ruins of God. He wanted to use this opportunity to understand the situation so he would not kill him for the time being. "That's right." Little Phoenix cried and said, "In order to protect our divine temple rainbow spiders, I had no choice but to move and hide here. So I understand what you mean. It seems like you want me to help you kill those giant strength fire apes," Yu Qianqiu said with a cold gaze. "Tell me how many there are first." Little Phoenix wiped her tears and said, "There aren't many and I don't want Mister to help me kill them all. I only hope that Mister can kill their leader, the Ape King, and I can handle the rest myself. I don't dare to trouble Mister. There's also an Ape King, so that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu nodded and suddenly asked, "But our cultivation is about the same. Since you're not the Ape King's opponent, why do you think I can kill it? How high is the Ape King's cultivation?" Little Phoenix explained impatiently, "Although the Ape King's cultivation has reached the early stage of Great Immortal, Mister can control a divine item like the purple fire. Under the purple fire, how can it be Mister's opponent? It should be easy for Mister to kill it. Since Madame Kai Feng is so confident, I can give it a try." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand towards the outside of the cave and said, "Then I'll trouble Madame to lead the way. I'll go meet that Ape King." He wasn't afraid of any danger because he could leave at any time. Instead, he wanted to take this opportunity to find someone to lead the way and find out more about the situation in the ruins of God. It would also be convenient for the people of Utopia to train here. Little Phoenix was stunned. She didn't expect him to agree so readily. Her eyes flickered and she couldn't help but hesitate. Yu Qianqiu immediately frowned and said in a deep voice, "Could it be that Madame suspects that I have ulterior motives? You should know that if I had any evil intentions towards you, I would have already attacked you. If Madame doesn't lead the way, then let's forget about this matter. I don't dare to wander around the ruins of God." Hearing this, Little Phoenix thought about it and realized that it made sense. If he really wanted to deal with her, there was no need for him to take such a big detour. He immediately smiled and said, "Mister, what are you talking about? I just didn't expect Mister to be so straightforward. I'm a little overjoyed. Mister, there's no need to worry too much. Please follow me." With that, he flew out of the cave. Yu Qianqiu followed behind her with a cold smile on his face. He only believed 30% of her words at most. Chapter 938. A golden-robed man who came from outside the Divine Ruins realm could defeat a late-stage immortal emperor expert? Yu Qianqiu didn't think too much about it. Who else could it be other than the immortal emperor Jin Tai? It was really strange. The rumored Jin Tai was heartless. Since he could defeat the #1 expert in the Divine Ruins realm, it was rare for him to not kill him. Looks like you are quite the courageous one. Others would not dare to step foot into this sea of mist, but you chose to stay inside, Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. He was more or less asking why. Why would I want to take such a big risk? I was really scared by the Ape King. In order to save my life, I could only take care of it for a while, so I took the risk to hide inside. Kai Feng shook her head and smiled bitterly. Didn't Mr. Yu notice? I hid under the canyon and almost didn't dare to take half a step out of the cave. I even had to hunt for food. I was afraid that others would discover me and spread the news to the Lion King's ears. This time, I hope that Mr. can help me get rid of that evil Ape King and return my freedom. I will definitely repay you in the future. Although the distance between the two of them was very close, it was difficult to see the expression on each other's faces. Yu Qianqiu could not tell if what she said was true or false and directly replied, "Of course I am a man of my word. Since I have agreed, I will definitely do my best. Madam, don't worry." Kai Feng's face, which was separated by the thick fog, was filled with joy. She immediately promised solemnly, "This servant naturally trusts Mr. If this matter is successful, if Mr. has any orders in the future, Kai Feng will do his best." Yu Qianqiu laughed. He had no intention of talking to her about those things that he didn't know if he would be able to fulfill in the future. He changed the topic. Didn't the Lion King restrict experts of the immortal stage or above? Why can't I see any fierce beasts in this sea of mist? Kai Feng immediately explained, "This has nothing to do with the Lion King's restrictions. The main reason is that the Divine Ruins realm opens once every 100 years. Right now, it is not long before the Divine Ruin realm closes. The vicious beasts that were originally wandering in the fog and hunting for food have been killed by you guys from the outside. They are all hiding and do not dare to go in for the time being. After a little longer, after a few years, they will naturally charge in again." So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but shake his head. It seemed humans were the fiercest, even fiercer than beasts. Although Kai Feng said that there was no danger in the fog, Yu Qianqiu was still vigilant of his surroundings, especially the woman beside him. He was tense on the inside but relaxed on the outside. The two of them talked and laughed along the way, and their relationship seemed to have begun to harmonize. As they talked and laughed, the scenery in front of them became brighter and brighter, giving people the feeling that they were flying into the light. Kai Feng reminded him, "We're about to get out of this sea of mist." As expected of a local who was familiar with the way. As soon as she finished speaking, their eyes suddenly lit up. The two of them instantly rushed out of the sea of mist, and a vast world appeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. After flying for a short distance, the two of them almost stopped in the air at the same time and looked around. The sun was shining, the mountains and rivers stretched endlessly, and the unknown ancient trees towered into the sky. It was full of vitality and there was no sign of danger. Kai Feng opened her arms and breathed in the fresh air to her heart's content. An expression of extreme enjoyment appeared on her face as she slightly moaned, "We're finally out again." Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. He turned back to look at the vast sea of mist behind him and asked, "Why is there such a large area of fog in the Divine Ruins realm? It feels a little abrupt. Could it be that someone set up some kind of formation?" Kai Feng opened her eyes and smiled, "I don't know. In any case, it existed a long time ago. With the opening of the Divine Ruins realm as the center, the surroundings are covered by a large area of thick fog. I think we're not too far from the Great Flaming Mountain." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, indicating that they should continue on their way. He had no intention of wasting too much time here. Kai Feng immediately nodded with a smile. She naturally hoped to resolve the trouble as soon as possible, and the two of them quickly flew away. It did not take long before they arrived at a vast swamp. As Yu Qianqiu was wondering why there were no ferocious beasts in this place where ferocious beasts roamed, the white clouds above their heads suddenly surged. A strong and vicious wind covered their heads as a black silhouette suddenly pounced at them at a strange speed. Yu Qianzhou's pupils shrank slightly. He discovered that the one attacking them was actually a black eagle with a wingspan of more than 20 meters. He immediately teleported hundreds of meters away. However, the phoenix remained completely unflustered as it swung its arm through the air, and its entire arm transformed into a massive spider limb. Like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, it radiated faint golden light as it slashed through the air toward the oncoming falcon. The black eagle seemed to be taken aback. It quickly flapped its wings and tried to dodge. However, it was not faster than Kai Feng at all. A golden light pierced directly into its chest and abdomen without any effort. The black eagle flapped its wings and struggled, but its abdomen was directly cut open by Kai Feng's arm. A rain of blood burst out. Caw! With a sad cry in the sky, the black eagle suddenly fell into the swamp below. Yu Qianzhou was slightly shocked. This spider's limb was really sharp and vicious. His figure flashed and he chased after the falling eagle. He wanted to take this feathered beast's beast core. But at this moment, a beam of red light suddenly shot out from the swamp below like a cannonball, piercing through the giant eagle that was still alive from 400 to 500 meters away. Then, the red light swept the giant eagle into a black hole that suddenly appeared in the swamp and engulfed it. The black hole was more than 20 meters long and wide. After swallowing the eagle, it quickly closed, followed by a thunderous gulping sound. What is this? Yu Qianzhou was shocked. He quickly stopped and soared into the sky. Following the gulping sound, the swamp quagmire began to move. Pairs of eyes the size of tabletops began to emerge from the mud and grass. Their red eyes were frighteningly huge. Then many more black holes opened up in the swamp. They were of different sizes, but they were all similar to the black hole that swallowed the eagle. They were all aimed at Yu Qianzhou like cannons. Ah! In the sky, the phoenix turned its sharp limbs back into arms. With a shake of its head, it turned back into the head of a ferocious spider. It fiercely spat out a tyrannical breath, covering the swamp below like a violent gale. The berserk aura swept across, and the swamp below immediately became a mess. The black holes immediately closed up, and giant ugly toads that were 40 to 50 meters long jumped out of the swamp. There were also some that were only 10 meters long. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of huge toads appeared in the swamp, and as the water flowed in, they became muddy puddles. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of huge holes appeared in the swamp, and as the water flowed in, they became muddy puddles. Yu Qianzhou looked down with his mouth agape, and then looked at the huge toads that had disappeared into the distance. He was speechless. He never dreamed that there would be such a huge toad, and he couldn't help but stare blankly. The phoenix shook its head and returned to its original state. It flashed to Yu Qianzhou's side and said with a smile, "There are countless strange beasts in the ruins of God. They are called the heaven-drilling frog, and the curled tongue in their mouth is their sharp weapon for hunting. Don't underestimate their tongue, its penetrative power is abnormally strong. An adult heaven-drilling frog's tongue can instantly travel 1,000 meters and swallow its prey in one fell swoop. Normal prey's defense is very difficult to resist." Yu Qianzhou's gaze slowly retracted from the place where the toad had disappeared. He looked at the phoenix and said, "Looking at how Madame dealt with them as if they were light, it's really admirable." Chapter 939. Mr. You must be joking. I am not Mr.'s match. How would I dare to have any improper thoughts? Unless I'm tired of living. Kai Feng covered her mouth and smiled, brushing the matter aside. Yu Qianzhou had never thought of getting to the bottom of this matter. It was just for safety's sake. He wanted to remind Kai Feng not to treat him as a fool and not to play any tricks on the way to Flaming Mountain. He had to be on guard at all times. The two of them continued on their way, but their speed was much faster than when they were in the thick fog. Along the way, the strange mountains and scenery flashed past them rapidly, making Yu Qianzhou feel a little overwhelmed. Actually, after leaving the thick fog, they were not far from Flaming Mountain. A journey of 700 or 800 li would not take too much time for the two of them. When they saw the tall, maroon-colored mountain in the distance, Kai Feng suddenly made a hand gesture and stopped. Yu Qianzhou stopped as well and asked, "What's wrong?" Kai Feng pointed at the maroon-colored mountain, feeling a little uneasy. She bowed to Yu Qianzhou and said, "That's Flaming Mountain. The Ape King lives there. I'll have to trouble Mr. to take care of this matter." Yu Qianzhou looked at the maroon-colored mountain that was emitting black smoke in the distance. It was clearly an active volcano. However, he did not find it strange. Since those colossal armed fire apes like to forge things, it was only natural for them to find volcanoes as a place to rest. He frowned and said, "You mean you want me to go alone?" You're not going? Kai Feng rubbed her belly and said, that ape king wants to kill me but I am not his match. Now that I'm pregnant I really, don't give me that. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand without hesitation and said, don't use your pregnancy as an excuse. You've already eaten it, so what else is there to say? Furthermore, I don't know anything about that ape king. What if you sell him off? Either we go together or we go back together. In any case, it's impossible for me to take the risk alone. Do as you see fit. There. Kai Feng's hand, which was stroking her round belly, froze. She didn't think that the usually easygoing Yu Qianqiu would suddenly become impatient. She looked at the great flaming mountain in the distance and began to waver. She wasn't sure if she should take this risk. Now that things have come to this, there are some things that I might as well make clear. Yu Qianqiu clasped his hands behind his back and said indifferently, it's not a problem for me to help you kill the ape king, but I can't do it for free. After this, you have to help me get 5,000 inner cores of various fierce beasts. If you agree, we'll continue. If you don't, then forget it. He put on the face of a profiteer who was negotiating terms at the last moment. Seeing this, Kai Feng actually relaxed a little and asked suspiciously, what do you want 5,000 fierce beast inner cores for? Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and said, you don't have to worry about that. I naturally have my uses for it. If it weren't for the fact that it's inconvenient for me to travel in the realm of divine ruins as a human, I wouldn't need to ask for your help. You just have to tell me if you agree or not. Kai Feng looked at the great flaming mountain in the distance. After a moment of deliberation, she gritted her teeth and said, fine, I agree. As long as you can help me kill the ape king, leave the 5,000 inner cores of various fierce beasts to me. You're wrong. Yu Qianqiu waved his finger and said, the two of us are going to kill the ape king together. You're so afraid of the ape king, it makes me wonder if the ape king is really as weak as you say. Don't tell me you're deliberately sending me to my death. Kai Feng couldn't help but find it funny when she heard this. This man was afraid of wolves in front of him and tigers behind him. It turned out that he was a coward who put on a brave front. She immediately said with a serious expression, Mister, you're thinking too much. What I mean is that I want to join forces with Mister to kill the ape king. When Mister sees the ape king later, just release your purple fire to burn it. You must know that the power of the purple fire is extraordinary. Then it's a deal. If you dare to go back on your word, don't blame me for being impolite. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, let's go. The two of them immediately flew toward the great flaming mountain. The great flaming mountain was built in the shape of a cone. The dome was caved in and black smoke was rising from it. There wasn't a single trace of green on the mountain, and people could feel the rolling heat waves from 1,000 meters away. There were many caves on the mountain, and from time to time, strong apes with fiery red fur could be seen walking in and out of the caves. Compared to other beasts, these animals were only a little more than 2 meters tall, so they couldn't be considered tall. However, their strong arms were very long, almost reaching the ground. When their palms were opened, they were bigger than basins, and when they clenched their fists, they looked like 2 iron hammers. This should be the giant strength fire ape. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air and silently watched the movements on the mountain. He then tilted his head and looked at Kai Feng. He nodded slightly, indicating that they could begin. Kai Feng clenched her teeth and shouted, "Old monkey, get out here." The sound waves spread out, startling the fire apes that were going in and out of the caves. When they saw the two people in the air, the fire apes on the mountain bared their teeth and roared at the sky. They clenched their fists and pounded their chests like drums. They then ran into the caves. As she spoke, she quickly turned into a stream of light and fled. B*TC. Since you're here, don't even think about running away. The Ape King looked at Yu Qianqiu cautiously. Seeing that he didn't move, it immediately chased after him while laughing. Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked. He shook his head and sighed. Do you think I'm that easy to use? Since you have ulterior motives, I can only accompany you. Then he flew toward the two people who were chasing after him. In order to not let the Ape King misunderstand, he deliberately slowed down. Hey, stay here. A loud shout rang out like a bolt from the blue. A huge fist appeared out of nowhere and smashed heavily into the back of the escaping Kai Feng. Bang! Kai Feng's body fell rapidly from the opponent's punch. However, its carapace was tough, so it was not affected by the heavy punch. However, she knew that she couldn't escape. She could only fight with her life on the line. Her falling body stabilized, and with a flash of red light, she revealed her original form of a ferocious giant spider. She flew up again like an octopus, brandishing her dagger and pouncing toward the Ape King. The Ape King immediately laughed and said, "Good timing." Just as he spread his arms to counterattack, he saw the giant spider suddenly spit out a monstrous yellow smoke from its mouth. This was not the Ape King's first time fighting with the temple rainbow spider. Naturally, he knew how powerful the yellow smoke was. It was a highly toxic substance. If he breathed in even a little, his entire body would immediately fester and he would die. The Ape King didn't dare to be careless. With a shake of its body, a torrential fiery red flame emerged from its body and wrapped its entire body. It rushed towards the yellow smoke, causing the yellow smoke to sizzle on the spot. As soon as he rushed into the yellow smoke, he saw a mess of golden daggers slashing toward him. The Ape King's movements in the air were extremely agile. Instead of retreating, he advanced, completely unafraid of the sharpness of the daggers. He stretched out his wide palm and found a place to strike. He grabbed one of the giant spider's sharp limbs and flashed to the back of the giant spider. The giant spider immediately panicked and struggled in the air. However, the Ape King stomped his foot and stood firmly on its back as if he had grown roots. There was no way he could get rid of him. Thereupon he flipped his other sharp limb and swung it behind him. The Ape King laughed aloud and easily caught the limb in his hand. Standing on the giant spider's back, the Ape King grabbed one of the spider's legs with each of his hands. He exhaled and pulled the two sharp claws like he was rowing a boat. He forcefully pulled them in a figure-8 shape. Crack! The giant spider let out a blood-curdling screech. Both of its sharp claws had been directly pulled off by the Ape King. Yu Qianqiu, who had just arrived, shook his head in amazement when he saw this scene. The Rainbow Temple spider's claws were so hard that it couldn't be broken with brute force. However, the Ape King was clearly very experienced in dealing with these large spiders. It knew where the spider's hard carapace was, and it easily broke the spider's claws at the joints. Chapter 940. At this moment, the Ape King attacked the spider's shield with its own spear. The two sharp claws in its hands were pierced into the giant spider's hard back, and the giant spider let out a shrill screech that made one's scalp go numb. The Ape King was in for a penny, and it didn't show any mercy when it started attacking. It took advantage of the giant spider's desperate struggle to attack continuously. In the blink of an eye, the Ape King was as fast as lightning on the giant spider's back. 6 of the giant spider's 8 sharp limbs had already been broken, and they were all pierced into the giant spider's back. The giant spider knew that it was already at death's door, and it was scared out of its wits. It used all of its skills to roll around in the sky. The Ape King let it do whatever it wanted, and its red hair fluttered majestically as if it had roots under its feet. It broke off another 2 limbs, pierced one into the giant spider's back, and held the other in its hand. It then flashed to the joint between the giant spider's head and neck. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered, and he knew that the Ape King was going to give the giant spider the final fatal blow. His gaze suddenly swept past the spider eggs that were like yellow leather balls stuck on the giant spider's abdomen, and he immediately shouted, "Ape King, don't destroy the spider eggs on her abdomen. I still have use for them." The Ape King's red hair fluttered in the wind. He looked very tall and sturdy. He glanced at him and raised his hand to stab down. With a kacha sound, the stab directly pierced into the gap between the spider's head and neck. The stab almost caused the spider's entire head to fall off. The giant spider's back had already been pierced 7 times, and with the fatal blow on its neck, the screeching sound was immediately cut off. The Ape King then bent its body and stretched out its wide palm to break the edge of the giant spider's carapace on the back of its neck. It flipped the giant spider over in the air, and it lifted the giant spider with a single palm before flying toward the flaming mountain at high speed. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and immediately flew after it. When the 2 of them returned to the flaming mountain, they immediately landed in front of the biggest cave on the mountainside. The giant spider's dead body was supported by 8 broken limbs on the ground. The Ape King walked out from under the broken limbs and it looked at Yu Qianqiu. The red-furred and armored apes on the great flaming mountain immediately brandished the metal spears in their hands and roared excitedly when they saw the great Ape King's bravery. However, they were stopped by the great Ape King with a wave of his hand. Yu Qianqiu walked around the dead spider a few times while clicking his tongue. He even crawled under the spider's huge body to take a look. Because the spider's 8 limbs were a few meters long, there was enough space underneath. The Ape King's gaze followed him all the time. He couldn't figure out if this person was a friend or foe. However, Yu Qianqiu's calm attitude made him even more wary. He was really unfathomable. After circling a few rounds, Yu Qianqiu jumped onto the giant spider's belly, which was facing the sky. There were thousands of spider eggs stuck on its belly. Each of them was yellow and as big as a fist, and they looked like rubber balls. Suddenly Yu Qianqiu was attracted by something. He squatted down to take a look and saw that there were small spiders swimming around in the slightly transparent spider egg. Brother Ape. Yu Qianqiu squatted down and stretched his head out. He waved his hand and said, "Come up, I have something to ask." The Ape King's expression twitched, but it still came up. It asked with a vigilant gaze, "What are you trying to do?" Yu Qianqiu didn't mind the distance between him and the Ape King. He had always believed that relationships were nurtured. He stood up and pointed at the spider eggs. "Can these little guys still live?" The Ape King glanced at the thousands of spider eggs and said after a pause, "They have already formed in the eggs. I reckon that they will break out of the eggs soon. As long as they don't cause too much damage and are removed carefully, they should be able to survive." "Is that so?" Yu Qianqiu squatted down again. He hugged a spider egg with both hands and started to play with it carefully. At first he was worried that the spider egg was too fragile and would break. Later on he realized that his worries were completely groundless. This thing could withstand the battle between the big spiders and the Ape King without breaking. Its skin was extraordinarily tough. He plucked one and held it in his hands. He looked at it against the sunlight for a while. The small spider inside was soaked in a ball of liquid and was happily waving its claws around. Yu Qianqiu immediately sent it into Utopia and quickly picked up the other spider eggs. "You want to hatch these spiders?" The Ape King stared at his actions and said with a frown, "These spiders are naturally ferocious. In addition, their shells are hard, and they have sharp claws and teeth. They don't have any natural enemies. Once they breed on a large scale, it will be a disaster for other animals. A long time ago our fire ape race suffered from their cruelty. If they encounter a situation where there isn't enough food, they will even kill each other and eat each other. It can be said that they are innately ferocious. They shouldn't exist in this world." Yu Qianqiu, who had already picked up most of the spider eggs, turned to look at the Ape King. He finally knew why the Ape King was so ruthless toward the temple rainbow spiders. Other than the fact that their shells could be used to forge things, it was also because of their racial hatred. He coughed and waved his hand. The only flaw was the stubble on his chin. However, it made him look more manly. Especially when a gust of wind blew his red hair on his burly figure, he gave off a feeling that he was a man of indomitable spirit. If he were to be compared with Nongzhu, he definitely wouldn't be as handsome as Nongzhu. However, Yu Qianqiu preferred to look at men like the Ape King. The Ape King was the kind of man that exuded manliness. If he were to be placed in the human world, he would be a man that women would go crazy for. "What do you want?" The Ape King frowned. The other party's gaze kept sizing up his vest and boots, causing him to suspect that after the other party took away the good things on the temple rainbow pearl, he had also taken a fancy to the things on his body. Sure enough, after Yu Qianqiu laughed awkwardly for a while, he pointed to the metal vest on his body and said, "I've long heard that Brother Ape is good at forging things. I wonder if you can take off your armor for me to see? There's nothing to look at if it's a shoddy job." Although the Ape King said this, he was a little proud in his heart. No one in the ruins of God would study this thing. Fighting or anything like that depended on one's cultivation and talent. He had only accidentally seen a human who had entered the ruins of God using the earth fire to refine an artifact. Out of curiosity, he had the heart to study it, and gradually he had found some ways to do so. "Brother Ape, could it be that you're afraid that I'll take away what you love?" "Don't worry, I'm just taking a look." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and guaranteed. The Ape King was no longer stingy. With a complacent heart, he took off his vest and handed it over to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he extended his hand to receive it. He discovered that it was extremely heavy in his hand, so heavy that it was hard to believe. He accidentally fell to the ground with a clang sound, directly smashing a small hole in the ground. When this incompetent performance fell into the eyes of the fire ape who was watching from the mountain, it immediately caused a burst of wild laughter. The Ape King was also slightly startled. He felt that with the other party's cultivation, he shouldn't be unable to even lift this thing. Yu Qianqiu did not mind the ridicule around him. He did not care about his face to the point of arguing with a group of monkeys. It was not that he could not lift it, it was just that he had been careless for a moment. He did not expect that a thin vest would actually weigh 10,000 kilograms. Compared to the ratio of volume and weight, this was the heaviest thing he had seen other than the divine sword. A trace of surprise flashed across Yu Qianqiu's face. He then casually waved his hand towards the ground, and the maroon mountain rocks surged out like a fountain, directly arching up to a waist-high conical mound. On top of it was the light golden metal vest. The surrounding fire apes' mocking laughter immediately stopped, and the ape king's gaze also continuously sized up the rising mound. Chapter 941. Yu Qianqiu was not in the mood to care about what they thought. He circled around the vest and looked at it, touching it. The reason why he had agreed to meet the Ape King was because he had heard from her that the Ape King was good at forging things. That was why he had come. There was no other reason. He now had the intention to create a batch of excellent weapons and equipment for the Utopia army under him. With Chen Feng's refining skills, he could no longer keep up with everyone's improvement speed. Actually, this was not the most important thing. He would never look down on his brothers for having low standards. If their standards were low, he could think of ways to get resources to help them improve. However, Qin Feng had already deteriorated. He was a completely different person from the Qin Feng who looked at life with a smile. He had been ruined by that seemingly pure and cute woman who was now hateful. He had discovered a few times that Xiao Wanqing was stirring up trouble and even sowing discord in front of Chu Ping'er. He almost could not help but kill her. The entire Utopia was under his control. If he really wanted to pay attention, nothing would be able to hide from him. However, he tolerated it for Qin Feng's sake. After all, Qin Feng was his first brother. If he did not take the final step, he was still a person of flesh and blood. He could not do that. Secondly, he was the one who had made the union between the two of them back then. If there was a mistake, he would also bear a lot of responsibility. He could not ruin Qin Feng's life and then kill him just because he did not like him. He could only hope that some people would behave themselves and give them enough time to consider themselves. They would not drift apart. Even if they could not get along in the end, it would be fine if they went their separate ways. Some things were not good to be ruthless. That would hurt both sides. There was another important reason. He also wanted to make use of Xiao Wanqing to see if Chu Ping'er could pass the test. Cultivation was endless. Apart from feelings, everyone was going to spend the rest of their lives together. If she did not act like a mistress, she would only cause trouble in the backyard. How could she have the right to be a mistress? Therefore, he had been watching coldly from the side and allowed things to develop. Yu Qianqiu had come to see how the Ape King's craftsmanship was and if he was satisfied. In the end, he discovered that the level of refinement was indeed not that great, but to be able to make such a thin vest so heavy, it would be unreasonable to say that he did not have some skill. He turned around and asked, "Brother Ape, how's the defense of your armor? If an ordinary person wants to break this armor of mine, it's no different from a fool's dream." An early-stage immortal emperor expert, White Rhinoceros King once struck this armor with all his strength, but it only left a slight dent on it. Ape King's complacent voice stopped abruptly. He saw that terrifying purple light appeared on Yu Qianqiu's palm again. He hurriedly stopped Ape King. "Wait, you are not an ordinary person." When Yu Qianqiu heard that even an early-stage immortal emperor expert could only leave a small dent on it, he couldn't help but want to use his purple fire to test it out. However, the Ape King wasn't willing to. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm just trying. I won't destroy your treasure." "Don't." The Ape King snatched the armor back and quickly wore it. Then he pointed to the corpse of the huge spider at the side and said, "There's no need to try. This armor of mine is made from the shells of over 5,000 mature temple rainbow spiders. If you can break its shell so easily, my armor will probably not be able to withstand it." Over 5,000 mature temple rainbow spiders' shells were used to forge such a small thing? Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. No wonder it was so heavy. Then he pointed to the boots on the Ape King's feet and said, "If I'm not wrong, this should be the same material as the armor you are wearing. Is it included in the 5,000? I used over 3,000 of these boots." The Ape King explained, "Don't be fooled by the large number of boots I used. They were all refined by me countless times before I got rid of the impurities and extracted the essence. I used the shell essence of the temple rainbow spiders to forge them." "Armor essence?" Yu Qianqiu muttered, guessing that it was the essence of the temple rainbow spider's carapace. He rolled his eyes and said, "I won't hide it from Brother Ape. I have a friend who is an expert in this path, and is also in the ruins of God. If Brother Ape doesn't mind, I can invite him over. You two might as well spar on this path." He believed that since he was someone who was obsessed with this path, he would definitely have an unusual fanaticism towards it. It should be of some use if he catered to his liking. Sure enough, as soon as the Ape King heard that there was someone who was proficient in this path in the ruins of God, his eyes lit up and he laughed heartily. Brother Yu, I wonder if your friend is far from here." If it's convenient, why don't you come over and have a chat? It's good for everyone to learn from each other. As expected, their relationship became much closer, and they were already calling each other brother you. Not far, not far. Brother Ape, please wait a moment. I'll find him right away. Yu Qianqiu said this and immediately turned into a ray of light and flew away. For safety's sake, he threw down a small silver ball on the way and disappeared. In the depths of the purple bamboo forest in the southern sea, Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared and looked around. The purple bamboo was faint, the cold fragrance lingered, and the spiritual energy was dense, like a paradise on earth. The purple bamboo forest was still the purple bamboo forest, but he didn't know how the people here were doing. He had been busy all this time and hadn't been here for a long time. He then flashed towards the direction of the bamboo lang blessed land. Just as he got closer, he heard two familiar voices talking, and Yu Qianqiu immediately stopped. With his current cultivation, if he wanted to hide and not be discovered, no one would be able to discover him. In the courtyard of the bamboo lang blessed land, Ziyi leaned against an old bamboo pole that supported the bamboo archway at the entrance of the courtyard. She lazily looked at Hibiscus, who was sitting cross-legged on the stone platform, and asked, "Hibiscus, does that big liar not want you anymore? Why hasn't he come to see you for so long?" Hibiscus's face was indifferent and she smiled with certainty. "He won't." "Are you so sure?" Ziyi's spirit was lifted, and she quickly walked to the stone platform. She squeezed her butt onto it and asked with bright eyes, "When my master came back last time, he said that the big liar is not a good person. Do you think that he would like a more beautiful woman outside?" Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. That old handsome brother Nongzhu was probably still angry about what happened last time. He shook his head and looked at Hibiscus to see how she would answer. However, once he heard it, he was immediately moved to a mess. "I don't know." Hibiscus smiled with satisfaction. "He told me to wait for him in the southern sea purple bamboo forest, so I'll wait for him here. I'll do whatever he asks me to do, and wherever he asks me to go, I'll go." That expression and tone, it was as if to be able to quietly wait for her man to come back was the happiest thing in the world, even if he really abandoned her. What a silly girl. Ziyi sat on the stone platform, and her legs under her purple skirt swung back and forth. She pouted and said, "You'll go wherever he asks you to go? That big liar loves money the most. Be careful that he'll trick you and sell you off one day. Then he must be doing that for my sake." Hibiscus tilted her head and said after thinking for a while. She couldn't think of any reason for Yu Qianqiu to harm her. Ziyi's eyes widened immediately. She was tongue-tied and said, "He sold you out for your own good. It seems that you've really been deceived by that big liar. That guy is too cunning. He's rotten to the core." Oh, which be asterisk Tisich is bad-mouthing me again? Yu Qianqiu walked out from the cobblestone path of the purple bamboo forest with a dark face. Anyone who heard someone bad-mouthing him as soon as they arrived would be unhappy. The two girls turned around at the same time. Surprise appeared on their faces at the same time, and they both got off the stone platform. Ziyi, who had just completely denied a certain person's character, ran faster than anyone else when she saw a certain person. She flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side and said with surprise, "Big liar, why are you here?" Yu Qianqiu's face darkened even more. He grimaced and said, "Shut your stinky mouth. What did I lie to you about?" Ziyi didn't get angry when she was scolded. Instead, she was very happy. She stuck out her bright red tongue and said, "In any case, you're a big liar." Yu Qianqiu. Hibiscus stood under the bamboo sign with the words, "Zhu Lang blessed land," and shouted in joy. Yu Qianqiu, who was glaring angrily at Ziyi and was about to explode, was instantly hooked by Hibiscus's shout. He directly ignored Ziyi and revealed a smile. He opened his arms and walked quickly towards Hibiscus. Hibiscus took a few steps forward and welcomed him. Then she hugged him. Ziyi, who was thrown behind, immediately pouted. It was not a problem for her to hang an oil bottle. "Are you all right? No one bullied you, right?" Yu Qianqiu greedily took a deep breath of the body fragrance that he dreamed about and asked. His palm lightly patted Hibiscus's back. This girl could always give him the simplest, most honest, most sincere and most pure feelings. If she didn't exist in his life, what meaning would there be in it? Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and thought about it. He couldn't help but hug her even tighter. He wanted to hug her into his bones and never separate from her in this life. "No, everyone is very good to me." Hibiscus closed her eyes and muttered in satisfaction. This embrace was also the most peaceful harbor that she dreamed about. Every time she was in this harbor, she would forget all the troubles and worries in the world. Ziyi walked to the side of the two and snorted coldly, hugging in broad daylight. How shameless. However, there was no place for her in this two-person world. The two of them didn't hear what she said. That's good. Yu Qianqiu patted her back. He opened his eyes and gently pushed her away. Then, he held her hands and carefully looked at her face. He smiled warmly and said, "My hibiscus is becoming more and more beautiful. Do you like it?" Hibiscus was overjoyed. Yu Qianqiu reached out and touched her nose. He smiled and said, "The more I look at you, the more I like you. I will like you forever. No one can stop me." Hibiscus hugged his arm and leaned her head on his shoulder. She said sweetly, "Me too." In the courtyard of Langxian, Nongzhu and ancestor Nanming had already been attracted by the commotion here. Nanming ancestor shook his head and chuckled as he watched this scene. Nongzhu's face darkened, especially when she saw Ziyi standing there in a shady manner. Her face darkened and she immediately shouted, "Sect leader, you busy man you, why are you so free to visit my tiny purple bamboo forest in the southern sea today?" Chapter 942. The resentment in Nongzhu's tone was not ordinary. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly at Farong. Farong smiled sweetly and stepped aside. Who said she was stupid? Actually, she knew everything in her heart. She just didn't want to trouble her man. Yu Qianqiu walked into Langxian courtyard slowly. He walked to Nongzhu and looked around. He sighed, "This is the best. I envy you." Nongzhu sneered and said, "You don't come to me without a reason. Just say it. What are you doing here? If you don't have anything to say, get out. I don't welcome you here." He was forced to leave in the immortal world. Now that he was forced to come to his territory, he naturally had to take revenge. Get out? What a joke. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the sky disapprovingly and said, "The land under the sky is mine. No one has the ability to make me get out. Don't make trouble. If you anger me, I will burn down the entire purple bamboo forest. Do you believe me?" Nongzhu's expression froze. He knew this guy too well. There was nothing he didn't dare to do in this world. Suddenly, Nongzhu raised his hands and howled at the sky, "Old Bai! If you are not dead, come back and have a look. Once you leave, your disciple doesn't care about me anymore. You are bullying me. Old Bai, come back and have a look. I have been living a very sullen life." He was also a smart man. When the hard way didn't work, he immediately used the soft way. However, it didn't match his image and temperament as an old handsome man. Ziyi saw her master's action and was stunned. She felt that her master was acting shamelessly. She was immediately flustered. Ancestor Nanming looked at the two of them and shook his head. He knew that they would not become enemies no matter how much they quarreled. He laughed and said, "What happened between you two? Why do you act like enemies the moment you see each other?" Although Nongzhu was forced to come back, he still kept his mouth shut about what happened in the immortal world. Ignore him. Yu Qianqiu looked at Grandmaster Nanming and said, "I came here especially to look for you. Let's talk in private." As he said this, he pointed to the depths of purple bamboo forest. "Looking for me?" Patriarch Nanming was stunned. Nongzhu's sorrowful voice was immediately cut off. She looked at Yu Qianqiu curiously and interrupted, "You came all the way to Nanming? Did something happen?" Yu Qianqiu thought about it and felt that there was no need to hide this matter from Nongzhu. He immediately set up a soundproof enchantment to cover the three of them. He looked at Nongzhu and said, "Senior Nongzhu, do you still remember the Divine Ruin Realm?" Grandmaster Nanming looked a little confused. He did not know about the Divine Ruin Realm. Nongzhu asked curiously, "I remember. Why?" "Then I'll have to trouble Senior Nongzhu to tell Senior Nanming about what happened in the Divine Ruin Realm and the immortal world," Yu Qianqiu said with a solemn expression. Ancestor Nanming asked suspiciously, "What Divine Ruin Realm? The place you went to last time? Isn't it the immortal world?" Old Nanming is like this. Since Yu Qianqiu had said so, Nongzhu had no more scruples. After all, it was uncomfortable to hide something from a friend. She immediately told him about what happened in the Divine Ruin Realm and the immortal world. After listening, Grandmaster Nanming could not help but sigh. After everyone cultivated to the soul formation stage, it was not an exaggeration to say that life was boring. He did not expect to miss out on such a bizarre and wonderful experience. Thinking about it, it was not unrelated to Nongzhu's obstruction. Just as he was about to complain, he heard Yu Qianqiu say, "We human cultivators are weak in the immortal world. We are in danger of being annihilated at any time, so we have to work together and work hard to become stronger. Senior Nanming is considered a person of virtue and prestige in the human world. This time, I came all the way to find Senior Nanming, hoping that Senior Nanming can help us gain a foothold in the immortal world. Of course. After Grandmaster Nanming nodded, he asked hesitantly, but with my cultivation, I'm afraid I won't be of much use in the immortal world. Could it be that you want me to refine magic treasures for everyone? Something like that. It's like this. Yu Qianqiu sorted out his thoughts and said, this time I returned to the divine ruin realm and went deep into a place that we didn't dare to enter last time. By chance, I met an ape king whose cultivation has reached the early stage of the great immortal realm. This ape king has a unique skill in the art of refining, and the things he refines are really not to be underestimated. I would like to invite Senior Nanming to communicate with him and see if he can learn his skills. Then he can be of some use to us who are struggling in the immortal world. When Nanming heard this, he pondered for a moment and did not say anything. It seemed that he was not very interested in the Ape King's unique skill in refining. This greatly exceeded Yu Qianqiu's expectations. Logically speaking, people who were obsessed with this path should be somewhat fanatical, and should not be indifferent. Could it be that Senior Nanming is unwilling? Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. If this matter was forced, it would really be a little troublesome. It's not that I'm unwilling. Grandmaster Nanming pondered and said, if there are enough materials for refining, and my cultivation can also reach a certain realm, to refine some powerful treasures for us cultivators in the human world, we don't have to secretly learn other people's skills. Our own skills are enough. She had always been quite interested in the privacy of others. However, Yu Qianqiu asked in a low voice, could it be that your ancestor is related to the Myriad Swords demon monarch who fought a fierce battle between the immortal world and the netherworld 100,000 years ago? How do you know? Grandmaster Nanming was stunned. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, I guessed. Actually, he knew better than anyone that if Grandmaster Nanming's ancestor came from the mythical fire palace in the immortal world, then he must have come during the great battle 100,000 years ago. After that, the immortal ascension stage was sealed, and the people of the immortal world could not come down at all. If they wanted to come to the human world through the netherworld, regardless of whether the netherworld was willing to let them or not, as long as the gate to the netherworld was opened, the Demon Ghost Regent's torture master would definitely know about it. However, none of the previous torture masters had mentioned this matter, so the only possible conclusion was 100,000 years ago. You guessed correctly. Grandmaster Nanming sighed slightly and said, the mythical fire palace in the immortal world was first founded by two people. The eldest was called Huolai, and the second was Huojun. They were brothers born from the same mother. After the founding of the mythical fire palace, the eldest Huolai was called the Grand Palace Lord, and the second Huojun was called the Second Palace Lord. Then, the Myriad Swords demon monarch appeared out of nowhere. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi joined forces to fight, but they still could not defeat him. Hence, they each gathered people from both worlds to fight against the Myriad Swords demon monarch. The high-ranking sects in the immortal world all received an order from the immortal palace. Each sect had to send a person with the highest cultivation other than the sect master to participate in the battle, or else they would be severely punished. Nongzhu shook her head and said, I don't know what the immortal emperor was thinking. The people with the highest cultivation in the immortal world were naturally the sect masters. Wouldn't it be better to just ask them to participate in the battle? They would be more useful. I don't know about this. The ancestors' records didn't explain this, Grandmaster Nanming said. Yu Qianqiu pondered and said, the situation at that time was already very dangerous. Everyone knew how powerful the Demon Lord of Swords was. They all knew that fighting with him was no different from sending themselves to death. If the immortal emperor directly summoned the sect masters to participate in the battle, it might have the opposite effect. Don't think that the people in the immortal world are good people. They will submit to whoever's fist is harder. At that time, the Demon Lord of Swords was the most powerful. If Jin Tai sent the sect masters to their deaths, then the sect masters might turn around and help the Demon Lord of Swords to fight Jin Tai. At least their chances of survival would be much higher. Jin Tai naturally didn't just rely on his fist to rule the entire immortal world. He definitely wasn't that stupid. He should understand this and wouldn't let himself fall into a situation where he was surrounded by enemies. You're so cunning. I can tell that you and Jin Tai are the same kind of people. Both of you are not good people, Nongzhu said in disdain. She then said to Grandmaster Nanming, Old man Nanming, continue. Chapter 943. Old ancestor Nanming nodded and said, "The Immortal Palace's request is to send the person with the highest cultivation other than the sect leader to participate in the war. This request is not a problem for other sects, but for the Mythical Fire Palace, it is a big problem. Because the situation of the Mythical Fire Palace is special, the two palace lords are similar to the sect leader, so they have always been equal. Therefore they asked the Immortal Palace if they could keep both palace lords. But the Immortal Palace's attitude is very firm. They can only keep one sect leader, unless there is someone with a higher cultivation than them. But the two of them are the founders of the Mythical Fire Palace, so there is no one in the Mythical Fire Palace who has a higher cultivation than them. In this way one of them has to participate in the war." "So, your ancestor is one of the two founders of the Mythical Fire Palace?" Nongju touched her chin and laughed. "Old man Nanming, I really didn't know that you have such a big background." Old ancestor Nanming frowned and said, "The Immortal Palace is powerful, so there was no other way. Second Palace Lord Huajun took the initiative to participate in the war. The Grand Palace Lord Hualai was very touched, so he asked second brother to stay and decided to go alone. Anyway, both of them are in the early Immortal Emperor stage, so it doesn't matter who stays. But in the end, second brother listed all kinds of reasons and insisted on going, so the first brother had no choice but to agree. But unexpectedly, on the eve of departure, second brother got into a dispute with a sect called the Heavenly Robe sect and was injured by them. Even if he wanted to participate in the war, the Immortal Palace wouldn't agree. So the next day, eldest brother took second brother's place and came to the human world to participate in the war against the demon lord of 10,000 swords. TSK. So you are the descendant of the Grand Palace Lord who founded the Mythical Fire Palace." Nongju sighed and said, "I have heard of the Tianyi sect who injured second brother in the illusionary Immortal City, but they were eradicated by the Mythical Fire Palace a long time ago. That war seems to have caused quite a big impact in the immortal world. Even now, people are still talking about it. It seems that the Tianyi sect suffered because they had a feud with the leader of the Mythical Fire Palace. No wonder." On the other hand, Yu Qianshou frowned and muttered, "He was injured on the day before we set off. What a coincidence." He had always been a suspicious person. Whenever he encountered something like this, he would be suspicious. To put it nicely, he was far-sighted and prepared for a rainy day. To put it bluntly, he was gauging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a villain. Nongju was not good at quarreling when it came to serious matters. Otherwise, he would not have been chosen as the successor of the previous two punishment masters of the Demon Ghost region. Hearing what Yu Qianshou said, he suddenly raised his eyebrows and squinted at the ancestor of Nanming, saying, "Old man Nanming, there may be some hidden story behind this. The timing is too coincidental. Most importantly, think about what time it was. That was when the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch was wreaking havoc in both the Immortal and Netherworld. At that time, the various sects would have restrained themselves. It's not right for something like this to happen at this time." The ancestor of Nanming looked at the two of them and nodded, saying, "You're right. There is indeed a hidden story behind this. Boss came to the human world and participated in several encirclements against the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. Luckily he did not die. In one fierce battle, he saved a deacon of the Heavenly Robe sect. In fact, he did not mean to save him, but at that stage, everyone had no way out and could only unite to fight against the enemy. When they could help each other, they would help each other. However, the deacon was seriously injured and could not be saved. Before he died, out of gratitude to Boss, he revealed a secret. It turned out that there was another hidden story behind the conflict between the second brother and the Heavenly Robe sect. In order not to take the risk of participating in this battle, he conspired with some people in the Heavenly Robe sect to put on a show and finally persuaded Boss to participate in the battle. Alas, that deacon of the Heavenly Robe sect was one of the people involved in the show." Nongju sighed and shook her head, saying, "Alas, Boss must be heartbroken after knowing this. It must not feel good to be schemed against by one's own brother. I just don't understand that second brother. Since Boss had already said that he would participate in the battle, why did he have to fight endlessly with Boss? Isn't this an unnecessary move?" Yes, Boss was very sad. In the beginning he did not believe it, but he knew that the words of a dying man are kind. There was no need for that deacon of the Heavenly Robe sect to lie to him before he died. Later on, when he thought about second brother's previous actions, there were indeed some loopholes. It was just that he trusted his brother too much and did not suspect anything. Elder ancestor Nanming sighed. "You are the same kind of person as second brother. What do you think of this?" Nongju asked Yu Qianshou. "You are the same kind of person as second brother. Yu Qianqiu immediately retorted, but then he frowned and said, when it comes to things like history, the general framework shouldn't be wrong, but the minor details can't be completely trusted. You can't just blindly follow what everyone says. I'm afraid only the people involved know what exactly happened best. Oh. Nongzhu's eyes lit up and she said, did you see something? Why don't you say it and let us hear your wise opinion? Elder Ancestor Nanming looked over, also wanting to hear what wise opinion Yu Qianqiu had. It's not a wise opinion, but Senior Nanming, please don't be angry when I say it. It's just my guess. Yu Qianqiu smiled. Elder Ancestor Nanming smiled and said, it's something that happened 100,000 years ago. Is there a need for me to be angry? Just say it, I'm all ears. Yu Qianqiu nodded and organized his thoughts. Then he said, not everything that comes out of a person's mouth is the truth, even though that boss is your ancestor. Naturally, I'm not saying that your ancestor is lying. It's just that this matter has already passed for 100,000 years. We have no way to verify the truth unless the Lifire Palace leader, Hu Jun, is willing to announce the truth. But that's impossible. However, I don't think that the words that Huolai left behind for your descendants are true. I reckon that not many ancestors would purposely leave their ugly side for their descendants to admire. You don't have to talk about the big theory. Nongzhu urged, just tell me directly what's wrong with Huolai's words. Purple bamboo leaves swirled and floated down from time to time in the bamboo jade paradise. The two women in the courtyard stared at the three men talking loudly. The three men's expressions and actions were sometimes arguing fiercely, sometimes frowning, and sometimes beaming with joy. Although the two women couldn't hear what they were saying, they could more or less feel the unique charm of the men when they were talking about serious matters. Men in such situations were often more attractive to women. However, most of the time, the two women's gazes were focused on Yu Qianqiu. At this time, Yu Qianqiu's status and cultivation were much higher than the other two. The aura that unconsciously leaked out from his words and actions was obviously a notch higher than the other two. One had to admit that it was easy to attract the women's attention. That's the problem. As you said before, since the big brother has already said that he wants to participate in the war, then why does the second brother have to fight endlessly? It is indeed an unnecessary move. Yu Qianqiu's gaze suddenly became deep. He narrowed his eyes and said, but the crux of the problem is, if the big brother really wants to participate in the war, and the second brother really doesn't want to risk coming to the human world to participate in the war, I can't think of any reason for the second brother to deliberately beat around the bush. He just needs to decline slightly. If the big brother really wants to leave for the sake of his younger brother, the second brother can easily stay. I'm just afraid that the truth is that the big brother is the one pretending to decline. Nongzhu slowly nodded and said, that makes sense. I think I understand what you mean. Ancestor Nanming fell into deep thought. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the two of them and continued, you must know that the second brother colluded with the people of Tianyi sect to plot against the big brother. He took a great risk. Once the people of Tianyi sect threaten the second brother afterwards, the consequences can be imagined. In fact, it is impossible for the people of Tianyi sect to help for nothing. After that, they will definitely use this to threaten the mythical fire palace to obtain their own benefits. I'm afraid that the reason why the Tianyi sect was finally eliminated by the mythical fire palace must have something to do with this. It is highly likely that the second brother wants to silence the second brother. Yu Qianqiu finally asked, think about it again. If the big brother really wanted to participate in the war, why would the second brother pay such a great price and take such a great risk? Then the truth is very likely that after the mythical fire palace received the decree from the immortal palace, one of the two brothers had to participate in the war. But the two brothers were actually not willing to take the risk because at that time, the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch's limelight was too strong. With the strength of one person he could fight against the huge forces of the immortal and netherworld alone. He was completely invincible in the three realms. How many people would not be afraid of him? Nongzhu nodded and said, in other words, the two brothers actually did not want to participate in the war, so they pretended to decline. And the second brother was a little more scheming. Although he pretended to decline, he pretended to be serious and insisted on going. Because he was too decisive, even the big brother did not see through it. But it was to the big brother's liking, so the big brother pretended to agree reluctantly. Little did he know that the second brother was far-sighted. In order to save his life, he played a dirty trick at the critical moment. The big brother was fooled just like that. He did not even know that he was betrayed by his own brother. Instead, he shed tears of gratitude and went to participate in the war. Who knew that after that, he accidentally found out the truth in the human world? I guess he was almost mad at that time. Who knows how he made up his second brother in his last words. After the analysis, he turned to old ancestor Nan Ming and asked, "Old man Nan Ming, did your big brother's ancestor's last words scold the second brother to be worse than a pig or a dog?" Old ancestor Nan Ming was speechless. Although he did not know whether the analysis of the two fellows was right or wrong, it was indeed very possible. Chapter 944. Yes. Nongzhu nodded and said, "Second brother is really good." Not only did he retreat before advancing, but he also played a trick to confuse Big Brother. He even cried and shouted to go with us. Big Brother is really touched by this brotherly love. Unfortunately, there was an accident. The eldest brother didn't expect that it was his beloved younger brother who was playing dirty. Therefore, the eldest brother was willing to die without any complaints. If the eldest brother didn't happen to know the truth, perhaps he would still remember the brotherly relationship until the day he died. TSK. Second brother is really powerful. No wonder mythical fire palace can survive for so long. I say, old man Nan Ming, don't be angry anymore. After all, if you count your ancestor's generation, you and the current mythical fire palace sect leader Huijun are the same ancestor. The matter has already passed for so long, let the past be in the past. Did I say what I'm complaining about? The Nanming ancestor didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know why these two fellows were consoling him here. He immediately rolled his eyes and said, "I say, have the two of you already made friends with the people of the Lifefire Palace in the immortal world? If not, why are you guys speaking up for the Lifefire Palace?" Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu were speechless at the same time. Ancestor Nanming hit the nail on the head. Yu Qianqiu really did become friends with the mythical fire palace, although it was a false friendship. Nongzhu hurriedly said, "Old Nanming, from what you said before, did your ancestor pass down the craftsmanship of refining treasures from the mythical fire palace?" Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of this and his eyes lit up. Ancestor Nanming paused and said after a moment of silence, "Yes. It was indeed passed down. Originally, my ancestor was lucky enough to survive until the last battle against the demon monarch of Thousand Swords in the immortal world and the underworld. He could have returned to the immortal world to settle the score with second brother. Who knew that at this time the sky would change and countless golden thunderbolts that had never been seen before fell from the sky? Golden thunderbolts? Really? Nongzhu was stunned. Yu Qianqiu was not surprised because he had heard from Bai Changchun that there were indeed countless golden thunderbolts cleansing the human world. As for what happened, he did not know. It shouldn't be fake. Grandmaster Nanming recalled and said, "My ancestor's last words said that the power of that golden thunderbolt was very strong. It almost killed all the experts of the immortal realm and the netherworld who were wandering in the mortal world. Even the emperor of the immortal realm and the emperor of the underworld couldn't escape. Luckily, the cultivation of those two was indeed strong. However, it still scared the two supreme martial artists of the immortal realm and the netherworld so much that they fled in panic. My ancestor was lucky. Although he wasn't directly struck by the golden thunderbolt, he was still implicated by the aftershock. He was an early-stage immortal emperor expert and he became immortal." Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu looked at each other. Even the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld had to flee. Therefore, the power of the golden thunderbolt was unimaginably terrifying. Nongzhu asked in confusion. No matter what, he was an early-stage immortal emperor expert. Even if his cultivation was destroyed, he shouldn't have degenerated into a mortal with the strength of his body. Grandmaster Nanming shook his head and said, "I don't know why my ancestor was beaten into a mortal. In the end, we can only blame it on the wrath of heaven." Yu Qianqiu was thoughtful when he heard this. He used thunder and lightning to forge his immortal body. Maybe the golden thunderbolt could really beat an immortal cultivator into a mortal. Not only was he beaten into a mortal, but his dantian was also destroyed. Grandmaster Nanming sighed and said, "In this way, the possibility of my ancestor returning to the immortal realm was completely cut off. Think about it, how long can a person live after becoming immortal? The limit of his lifespan became the biggest problem. My ancestor felt that death was approaching step by step, but he was still unwilling. He married a wife and had children in the mortal world. Before he died, he left a will for his descendants, hoping that one of them would return to the immortal realm to help him take revenge and regain the power of the mythical fire palace. However, his descendants were only mediocre mortals. They didn't have the aptitude to cultivate. Fortunately, after experiencing all kinds of calamities for 100,000 years, the inheritance didn't break until I was born. Sigh. However, the path of immortal ascension is long and difficult. Moreover, there's no need for me, a descendant, to continue the hatred from 100,000 years ago. Yu Qianzhou and Nongzhu sighed. They didn't expect a dignified early-stage immortal emperor expert to end up like this. They couldn't help but sigh at how unfortunate his fate was. Since Grandmaster Nanming has the refining skills of the mythical Fire Palace, it seems that there's no need to go to the God Ruin Realm to steal the craftsmanship of the Ape King. Nongzhu glanced at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Maybe I'm ignorant." Yu Qianzhou pondered for a moment and said, "But I think the craftsmanship of the Ape King is indeed extraordinary. Senior Nanming, why don't you take a trip with me? If it's really not worth mentioning, we'll come back." "All right. I'll go with you to take a look." Grandmaster Nanming's tone was filled with pride. Yu Qianzhou immediately smiled and removed the soundproof enchantment. After learning that it was a teleportation formation, he didn't even have time to look at it in detail before the scene in front of him changed. He was in a dark and dense forest that covered the sky. Stepping on the thick rotten leaves, Grandmaster Nanming looked around at the unknown ancient trees around him and asked in shock, "This is the Divine Ruin Realm?" "Yes. Follow me." Yu Qianzhou called out and dashed out of the forest. Grandmaster Nanming followed. Yu Qianzhou waved his arm and pointed at the maroon mountain in the distance that was emitting black smoke. "That is the great flaming mountain where the Ape King lives. It is indeed a good place to refine things," Grandmaster Nanming judged with the eyes of an expert. After Yu Qianzhou told him some things to take note of and avoid, the two of them dashed forward together. In a short while they arrived in front of the cave at the mountainside of the Great Flaming Mountain. When someone barged in, the great strength fire apes in the various caves on the mountain immediately roared and roared. When they saw that it was Yu Qianzhou, they quieted down. It was Grandmaster Nanming's first time seeing the great strength fire apes, so he naturally couldn't help but take a few more glances. Yu Qianzhou was just about to call out to the Ape King when it was alarmed by the commotion outside the cave. "Ah, Brother Yu is finally here," the Ape King said with a laugh. When it saw Grandmaster Nanming, it guessed that he should be the person that Yu Qianzhou mentioned. It couldn't help but size him up carefully. When it realized that he only had the cultivation of middle-stage deity transformation, it couldn't help but look a little doubtful. It wondered if this person was really an expert in this field. After Yu Qianzhou introduced the two of them, Grandmaster Nanming felt a little apprehensive. After all, it was his first time seeing a great immortal realm cultivator. His gaze lingered on the metal vest on the Ape King's body. It was probably the one that Yu Qianzhou mentioned. The Ape King then waved its hand toward the cave and said, "Please come in. Let me see Mr. Nanming's refining skills." Yu Qianzhou smiled and said politely, "We are guests, so how can we usurp the host's position? Brother Ape, you should let us see your superb skills first." He had made up his mind. If Grandmaster Nanming liked the Ape King's skills, then he would talk about it. If not, then he would not waste time and send Grandmaster Nanming back as soon as possible. "All right." The Ape King waved its hand straightforwardly. "Please come in." It led the two of them into the cave. The cave was spacious enough to accommodate 7 to 8 people walking side by side at the same time. Waves of heat surged out from the inside. After walking for a short distance, there was a stone staircase that slowly led downwards. It should be the most primitive forging method. But I can't be sure. Let's wait and see. After the Grandmaster Nanming replied, his pupils suddenly shrank and he stared at the dark platform that was enduring the forging. With the Ape King's cultivation, the countless heavy punches that he had unleashed could even cause a mountain to collapse. However, the black platform's endurance was so strong that it was unbelievable. No matter how many punches were thrown at it, it would not budge. After another half a day, the bright red carapace of the spider finally began to shrink bit by bit under the bombardment of countless heavy punches. Chapter 946. The strange thing was that after such a long time, the red color of the carapace should have gradually dimmed due to the heat dissipating. However, the spider's carapace didn't seem to be affected by the Ape King's concentrated attacks. Even after half a day had passed, it still maintained its bright red heat. Yu Qianzhou understood the reason after pondering for a while. It was probably related to the Ape King's blazing fists and the raging flames that surged out of its body. The Ape King moved quickly with flames all over its body. It was as if it was using fire to wrap around the spider's carapace to prevent it from cooling down. In addition to the violent and concentrated blazing fists, even a piece of dark steel would be scorched by it. What a one-track mind. As Yu Qianqiu sighed, he glanced at elder ancestor Nan Ming and immediately realized that something was wrong. He followed the elder's gaze and also noticed that there was something strange about the pitch-black platform. He transmitted his voice and asked, "Elder Nan Ming, is the platform that withstood the tempering a treasure? I can't tell what it is either, but it must be a treasure to be able to withstand such heavy attacks," elder ancestor Nan Ming said with certainty. 3 days passed by just like that. The spider's carapace had long changed beyond recognition. Its huge body that was about 10 meters long had become a 2-meter square metal block. Even so, the Ape King continued to swing its blazing fists. Not only did its momentum not weaken, the sounds became even more intense. Of course, this was related to the shrinking of its body and the shrinking of its range of movement. This way, the intensity of the attacks on the metal block became even more concentrated. When the 6th day passed, the 2-meter square metal block became less than a meter. Yu Qianqiu went from being dumbfounded to feeling numb. He couldn't help but admire the Ape King's profound cultivation. This was 6 consecutive days of intense consumption. Yu Qianqiu naturally didn't have the patience and time to stay here and slowly waste his time. Every day he would go out to deal with his own matters and check out the surrounding terrain. However, elder ancestor Nan Ming's gaze gradually became fiery. He seemed to have understood something. He stared at the gradually shrinking metal block day after day without blinking. When Yu Qianqiu returned from his routine trip, he saw that the Ape King was still swinging its fists like rain. He cursed the Ape King in his heart for not being afraid of dying from exhaustion. After waiting for a while, he felt like he was about to doze off again. When he saw that Grandmaster Nan Ming was full of energy, he sent him a voice transmission out of boredom. "Senior Nan Ming, is there any meaning to this fellow's actions?" "Yes, of course there is." Grandmaster Nan Ming was a little excited as he transmitted his voice and exclaimed, "So that's how it is." Who would have thought that a stupid method would have its own benefits? Fortunately, he was gifted. If it was someone else, no matter how high their cultivation was, it would be difficult for them to continuously temper themselves and return to their original state. Every time he punches, some of the impurities in the metal will be expelled. If this continues, all the impurities in the metal will be expelled until it can no longer shrink. At that time, what will be left will be the essence of the metal. "I see. What are the benefits?" Yu Qianqiu asked. He pondered that if the effect was really great, his gold incantation should be able to display its usefulness in this aspect. It would be much better than the Ape King's stupid method. Grandmaster Nan Ming explained excitedly, "You must know that the purer the quality of the material, the stronger its extensibility and capacity. For example, a piece of pig iron, if it hasn't been tempered to remove its impurities, its extensibility will definitely be very poor and it will break easily. However, after being tempered to remove its impurities, you will be able to bend it, but it won't break easily. This is extensibility. In other words, it can contain more formations, and the treasures refined will also be of higher quality. This is a great benefit to the refiner. Moreover, this material is the shell of the Rainbow Temple spider, which is already abnormally hard." His explanation immediately piqued Yu Qianqiu's interest. He couldn't help but look forward to the Ape King's early completion. In the end, they waited for the 10th day. As the storm-like fiery fists gradually died down, the flames on the Ape King's body also disappeared. Finally, it stopped while sweating profusely and panting. With a pale face, it walked down with a palm-sized piece of metal that was still fiery red. However, its body was a little shaky. It was obvious that it had used up a lot of its cultivation. This big spider's body contains a lot of armor essence. In the past, I hunted 1,000 ordinary Rainbow Temple spiders, but the amount of armor essence in one of its bodies was not even as much. "Mr. Nan Ming, what do you think?" the Ape King said while panting. Yu Qianqiu's gaze was filled with admiration as he looked at the Ape King. At this moment, the consumption of his cultivation was probably 80 to 90% of his prime. If he encountered someone with ulterior motives, it could be said to be the most dangerous moment. However, it had no distractions towards the two of them. It was a sincere and magnanimous person worth associating with. Not bad, not bad. Such a good thing can be said to be perfect. It can definitely be used to refine a top-notch treasure. The Nan Ming patriarch exclaimed in admiration as he held the piece of metal that was gradually cooling. However, he then said with some regret, "It's a pity that there's too little." Otherwise, I would exhaust all my abilities to display my expertise in this and see what kind of good treasure I can refine. There's more here. The Ape King shouted hurriedly. Then, it eagerly took off the vest and boots on its feet and offered them with both hands. As long as Mr. is willing to teach me how to refine treasures, I am willing to give all of these to you. Ah! The Nanming Patriarch was stunned. He took the items in the Ape King's hands and compared them. Only then did he realize that they were made of the same material as the piece of metal. In his excitement he glanced at Yu Qianqiu. He seemed to be a little hesitant. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, "Brother Ape, the art of refining treasures is Mr. Nanming's specialty. He usually won't teach it to outsiders. If you acknowledge him as your master, then it'll be a different story." As he spoke he even gave the Ape King a look. The Ape King was stunned, but he immediately reacted. He knelt down at the Nanming Patriarch and bowed. Disciple Yuan Hong pays respect to master. The Nanming Patriarch's expression froze. He transmitted his voice to Yu Qianqiu. "This is too childish. His cultivation base is much higher than mine. How can I be his master?" "You're being pedantic. There's no seniority in learning. The one who's accomplished comes first. Besides, he's not asking you to teach him cultivation. He's learning your skills and refining treasures. In this aspect you're good enough to be his master." Yu Qianqiu transmitted his voice. "Besides, there's only benefits to you if you can take in a disciple with such a high cultivation base. At the same time, it'll also be beneficial to my future arrangements. Just take it as giving me face and take him in. As for how much you should teach him, it's up to you. No one can force you to do this, right?" He had his own plans. He had brought the army of Utopia to the Divine Ruin Realm for two reasons. Firstly, he was prepared to use the ferocious beasts in the Divine Ruin Realm to train them. Secondly, he wanted the army to use the training opportunity to collect the inner cores of the ferocious beasts so as to help Bai Sujin master the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra as soon as possible. However, this area was the Ape King's territory. It would be beneficial for the army of Utopia to have a good relationship with the Ape King. It would be even better if they could take care of him. Just as he was pondering how he could forge a good relationship with the Ape King, the Nanming Patriarch's appearance solved the problem. The Nanming Patriarch pondered for a while before freeing one of his hands to help the kneeling Ape King up. "Since that's the case, I'll take you in. Get up." "Thank you, master." The Ape King cupped his hands in excitement and stood up. He could not suppress the agitation on his face. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and shook his head with a bitter smile. "I used the same refining method as before and used 50,000 years on and off. In the end it ended up like this." Chapter 947. Yu Qianqiu walked to the black platform that was 3 to 4 meters thick, 100 meters long and 40 to 50 meters wide to take a look. He could not help but sigh inwardly. This old monkey was really persistent. He had actually spent almost 50,000 years to refine this huge metal plate. It really left him speechless. He then turned his head back and asked curiously, "Yuan Hong, since it's harder than the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence, why don't you use it to refine the armor you're wearing?" "I'm really ashamed." The Ape King cupped his hands at the Nanming Patriarch and explained, "It's not that I don't want to, it's because this thing is too hard. My clumsy method of forging a huge piece of metal is still passable, but it's too difficult to forge it into a well-connected armor. It's so difficult that I had no choice but to give up. It just so happens that the thing I'm forging lacks a sturdy base, so I may do with it. But now that Master is here, I'm sure Master will have a way to solve this." He then pointed at the crushed stones that were emitting the red light of the earth fire on the ground at the center of the mountain and said, "These crushed stones are the remains of that meteorite from beyond the heavens. There's still some metal in them, but it's precisely because I have no use for them after refining them that I might as well fill the earth fire and use them as scattered anvils when refining things." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly when he heard that. He stroked his chin and looked at the huge metal plate under his feet. His eyes lit up slightly as he asked, "Mr. Nanming, I'm sure the treasure refined from this thing won't be inferior to the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence, right?" The Nanming Patriarch walked forward and formed a strange and special complicated hand seal. He brewed a spell and cast it into the black platform. After examining it closely for a while, he said in astonishment and excitement, "It's really good stuff. It's 10 times stronger than the Rainbow Temple Spider's armor essence. It's such a waste to use such a good thing as a base." Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately lit up and he said, "Then how about we refine it into a treasure?" The Ape King's eyes also lit up, but when he saw the inspection spell cast by the Nanming Patriarch, his eyes lit up as well. It's naturally good to be able to refine it into a treasure, but it's a pity. Grandmaster Nanming shook his head slightly and sighed. It's a pity that my cultivation base is a little low, so it's hard for me to add formations to it when I'm refining it. If I'm not careful, it'll be ruined. The biggest problem was that it was just as Yuan Hong had said. Casting it was truly difficult. Even if one used a special method, it would take more than 10 years to refine a single treasure. Time is secondary, the main thing is, it's just too difficult. If your cultivation is raised to the immortal stage, can you add an array formation in here when you're refining? Yu Qianqiu asked. Patriarch Nanming was stunned. He then nodded and said, if I can raise my cultivation to the celestial realm, it shouldn't be a big problem with my comprehension over the years. But how can it be so easy to raise my cultivation to the celestial realm? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and stopped arguing about this problem. He then asked, then if I help you cast the item you want to refine first, the time needed to refine it should be greatly reduced, right? When he said this, the Nanming Patriarch and the Ape King's eyes lit up at the same time. They both recalled his miraculous method just now. This matter was probably not a problem for him at all. The Nanming Patriarch clapped his hands and shouted, this is the biggest problem. If you can cast it first, it'll greatly reduce the time needed to refine it. I can guarantee that you'll be able to refine a set of treasures in 10 days. However, after his excitement, his expression darkened again. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. But I'll say the ugly words first. With my current cultivation base, my control is not stable at all. There's still a high chance that it'll be ruined. Ah, the heavens are really on my side. Yu Qianqiu suddenly laughed maniacally when he heard this. He then cupped his hands at the Nanming Patriarch and said, Senior Nanming, I'll solve all the problems. You just need to help me refine a batch of treasures with this item. How about it? Really? As soon as the Nanming Patriarch said this, he felt that it was a little inappropriate. He looked at the Ape King and said, Yuan Hong, this is yours. I'll have to ask for your permission first. Yu Qianqiu immediately narrowed his eyes and stared at Yuan Hong. If he dared to stop him, then don't blame him for being impolite. Disciple will listen to master's arrangements. But disciple has a request. The Ape King bowed a little nervously and said, Disciple only asks that when master refines the treasures, disciple can be allowed to learn by the side. Even if it's to be an assistant to gain experience, it's fine. After he finished speaking, he did not dare to raise his head. Although he was now the disciple of the Nanming Patriarch, he was used to ruling over this area and being the overlord. It could be said that bad habits were hard to change. Otherwise, why would a disciple raise conditions to their master? But this was already a very big change. It would probably take some time to settle everything in one go. At the very least, he had to wait until the Nanming Patriarch revealed his methods of refining treasures and convinced him wholeheartedly. Otherwise, it was very possible that he would kill the Nanming Patriarch, his master, in a fit of unhappiness. After all, the ethics within the ruins of God could not be compared to the outside world. If Yu Qianqiu didn't praise his character, he would have directly consumed it. But once Yu Qianqiu praised his character, he immediately became a little timid. Others did not know, but he had been with Nongzhu for a long time. He often heard Nongzhu talk about the dirty things that Yu Qianqiu had done. The Yu Qianqiu in Nongzhu's mouth could be said to be a person who did all kinds of good and bad things. It would be strange if the Nanming Patriarch was not afraid. However, when he thought about it, Yu Qianqiu did not have the intention to harm him. With his current cultivation, if he wanted to harm him, he could do it directly. There was no need to go around in such a big circle. In addition, with Yu Qianqiu's unceasing urging, the Nanming Patriarch gritted his teeth and walked to the center of the dark platform. He sat down cross-legged and took the limit-breaking pill. The facts proved that Yu Qianqiu did not lie to him. When his cultivation successfully broke through to the final stage of soul formation with the help of the Spirit Stone, the Nanming Patriarch was immediately excited. He did not expect that he would break through the shackles that he had not broken through for so many years in one go. Of course, he had just taken a limit-breaking pill, so the toxins in his body were not heavy. Thus he did not suffer much. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would really doubt Yu Qianqiu's intentions. The Ape King saw with his own eyes that his master's cultivation broke through just like that. The shock in his heart could be imagined. The Nanming Patriarch had no more scruples now. Without the urging of Yu Qianqiu, he quickly swallowed the marrow-cleansing pill. After tossing and turning his body black, the Immortal Ascension pill was stuffed into his mouth like candy. However, he suffered a little this time. However, Yu Qianqiu had already told him in advance, and he was already mentally prepared. He gritted his teeth and finally endured it. His cultivation successfully stepped into the early stage of minor immortal. This is real. I really stepped into the immortal realm? The Nanming patriarch checked the changes in his body. He still could not believe it. He felt like he was dreaming. Did he really break through to the immortal realm that he dreamed of so easily? At the side, the Ape King looked at Yu Qianqiu as if he was looking at a god. He muttered in his heart, if I get on good terms with him, will he be able to help me improve my cultivation? Alright. Stop dreaming. Put on your clothes first. After I help you forge an immortal body, you will be considered to have truly stepped into the ranks of immortal cultivators. It's still too early to be happy. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand as if he was used to this scene. Looking at the old man's naked body was really boring. The Nanming patriarch was a little too excited. He no longer cared about being shy. After putting on his clothes, he obediently stood beside Yu Qianqiu and waited for instructions. In the past, he had never been so obedient in front of Bai Changchun. Yu Qianqiu also wanted to hurry up and get things done. He had too many things on hand and had no time to waste. Thus, he led the Nanming patriarch outside and the two of them flew to the peak of Flaming Mountain. How could the Ape King let go of such an opportunity to broaden his horizons? He braced himself and followed them. After Yu Qianqiu told the Nanming patriarch some things to take note of, he glanced at the Ape King who was standing nearby and watching weakly. He secretly pinched the purple flames in each of his palms and placed them on his back. He stood on the peak of the mountain with the demeanor of a grandmaster. Facing the heaven and earth, he shouted, "There is righteousness in the heaven and earth. Wind, fire, thunder, and lightning, listen to my command." Bunkers and hidden sentry posts radiated out from the valley in all directions. Inside the valley, Yu Qianqiu and Zhang Peng, the master and disciple duo, gathered a few others together. They kept using the soil to conduct some sort of experiment. After they were done, Zhang Peng quickly led them away. After Yu Qianqiu made a few rounds around the enormous underground works in the valley, Zhang Pengfang returned with a few jade archives and handed them to him. Yu Qianqiu then left after leaving some instructions to Zhang Pengfang. Zhang Pengfang had no idea what he was up to. With the jade archives in hand, Yu Qianqiu excitedly rushed back to Mount Great Flaming. When he barged into the cave and saw the master and disciple from Nanming, he waved the jade archives in his hand and said, "Let's get to work. Let's get to work." He put away the jade archives and leaped onto the huge, pitch-black platform. Grandmaster Nanming flashed to his side and asked curiously, "What kind of treasure are you planning to refine?" Yu Qianqiu sized up the size of the huge, pitch-black platform then asked, "I want to refine a batch of armor. What do you think?" Using the extraterrestrial metal to refine armor? Grandmaster Nanming was stunned. Isn't that too much of a waste? Normal armor won't do. With you around, can't you refine them all into treasures? As Yu Qianqiu spoke, he was suddenly stunned. He looked at Grandmaster Nanming and smiled. Extraterrestrial metal? Looks like you've already come up with a name for this item. It's a good name. Let's call the refined armor the extraterrestrial metal armor. Grandmaster Nanming was speechless. What was he talking about? Nanming, I've already thought of the appearance of the extraterrestrial metal armor. What do you think? Yu Qianqiu said to himself as he took a few steps back. He slowly opened his arms, and the pupils of Grandmaster Nanming and Ape King suddenly shrank. They saw that the huge, pitch-black platform suddenly seemed to come alive. Like a group of black ants, they climbed up from under Yu Qianqiu's feet and quickly covered Yu Qianqiu's entire body. A Yu Qianqiu wearing armor with only a pair of eyes revealed stood in front of the master and disciple. That wasn't the end of it. The armor continued to change its outer shape. Small and sharp spikes that were about 1 centimeter long covered the surface of the armor. Especially on the shoulders, there were 3 1-inch spikes in a triangular shape. There were also 1-inch spikes on the elbows and the backs of the palms, knees and soles of the feet. There was even a long sword on his back. The entire armor looked abnormally ferocious and evil. Dang, dang, dang. Yu Qianqiu walked a few steps in the armor. He scolded in a low, muffled voice through the dozens of small holes on his mouth that almost covered his entire face. Damn it, the extraterrestrial metal is indeed a little too heavy. I can't kill others like this, and I'm so clumsy that I can only wait for others to kill me. Then he turned his head and looked at Grandmaster Nan Ming. Nan Ming, what do you think is the most suitable thickness? Grandmaster Nan Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he walked in front of him. He looked at the thickness of the armor around his eyes and found that it was at least 1 centimeter thick. He said weakly, "It's too thick. In addition to the spikes all over your body, it would be strange if it wasn't heavy. Let's reduce it by 90%. Then she stood up and asked suspiciously, "Why are you so kind as to give me something good? Isn't it just a piece of broken metal? What good is this?" You don't know this. It took me a lot of effort to get this thing." Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly as he waved the thing in his hand and said, "This is called extraterrestrial metal essence. Don't be fooled by its small size, but its defense is amazing. I can guarantee that even if you use all your cultivation, you won't be able to break it." "Are you serious? It's really as powerful as you say?" Wei Chuanqiu's eyes lit up. She was instantly intrigued by Yu Qianqiu and was about to reach out to take a look. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianqiu hid it behind him and said with a smile, "Since you don't believe me, let's make a bet?" Wei Chuanqiu immediately became alert and sneered, "What bet? I think you're up to no good again. What extraterrestrial metal essence? I've never heard of it. It's just a piece of broken metal. You can give it to me if you want, but I don't care." "Look at you. I told you that you don't believe me. If this is considered a piece of broken metal, then there's nothing good in this world." Yu Qianqiu took out the piece of metal from behind him with a look of disdain and sighed, "How about this? In order to verify that this piece of metal you said is really indestructible, let's make a bet. If you can't break it, then I'm sorry. I'll take it back and not give it to you. If you can break it, then I'll give it to you." Really indestructible? Wei Chuanqiu thought that whether she gave it to him or not, there was no loss to her. She took the thing in her hand and flicked it with her finger. In the end, she found that it was really not an ordinary thing. Her eyes lit up again and she immediately became spirited. "How is it? I didn't lie to you, did I?" Yu Qianqiu urged, "Quickly try it and see if you can break it." With a dang sound, Wei Chuanqiu's finger touched it with a green light. Then they put their heads together and looked at it. There was no mark on it at all. Wei Chuanqiu immediately exclaimed, and then a series of green light poked on the broken piece of metal. After a series of dang 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 sounds, there were some slight scratches on it, but it was far from being damaged. Such a thin thing was actually so indestructible. Wei Chuanqiu immediately clicked her tongue and said in surprise, "It's really a good thing." "Of course." Yu Qianqiu was delighted, but he didn't forget to ask, "Old bat, is that all you can do? Have you used all your cultivation?" "Just a little more. If you can't break it, I'll take it back." "Why are you in such a hurry?" Wei Chuanqiu rolled her eyes, then she mustered up her strength and poked the piece of metal for a while. However, only some slight scratches were left, which was really incredible. Wei Chuanqiu was still unwilling to give up. He held the two sides of the piece of metal and used all his strength to pry it open. "This thing is called extraterrestrial metal essence, right? Where did you get it? I really can't use my hands and feet here. It looks like I have to find a secluded place to attack it. Otherwise, it'll be really hard to break it open. This is a good thing. It can't be better to refine it into a treasure." The piece of metal showed signs of bending when he used so much strength, but once he relaxed, it immediately returned to its original shape. All right. Stop for a while." Yu Qianqiu took the thing from his hand and put it away, saying, "Look at how strenuous you are. It'll be a waste if you continue." He turned around and left. He was satisfied that the experiment had reached this stage. Even Wei Bat King couldn't break it with his cultivation, so there was nothing more to say. If he let Elder Nan Ming refine it a little more, its defense would probably be even stronger. "It's fine as long as I know what I'm doing. I'll try again when the armor is done." "Yu Qianqiu, don't go. I haven't used my full strength yet." "I'll try again," Wei Chuanqiu shouted from behind. He was prepared to trick Yu Qianqiu into giving him such a good thing. Unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu didn't fall for his trick at all. "Even if you're as treacherous as a ghost, you still have to drink the water I wash my feet with." Yu Qianqiu turned around and chuckled. He waved his hand at Wei Chuanqiu and went into one of the rooms. Wei Chuanqiu looked at the guarded door behind him and thought for a while before sitting down cross-legged. However, just as he closed his eyes, he suddenly opened them again. In a flash, he chased after the room that Yu Qianqiu had gone into. In the end, he discovered that Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared. He immediately gritted his teeth. Only after he calmed down did he realize that he had been tricked by Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu had gone around in circles and didn't know how to react. He couldn't understand why he would be so stupid as to make such a bet with Yu Qianqiu. If the item couldn't be broken, it wouldn't be given to him. If it was broken, it would be given to him. Wouldn't he be at a disadvantage regardless of whether he won or lost? If things could be broken, why would he want a broken item? Is this kid too free? Why did he come here to play this game? Wei Chuanxiu thought about it and found it strange. There didn't seem to be any benefits for Yu Qianqiu to make this bet. However, what he didn't know was that Yu Qianqiu was purely using him as an experiment. What would he think if he found out? In the belly of the great flaming mountain, Yu Qianqiu had already put on his armor again. After experimenting, he listened to Patriarch Nanming's suggestion and reduced the armor's thickness by 90%. Naturally, the weight was reduced by a lot. Zhang Xian took the storage bracelet from the other party's hand and wore it on his left and right wrists. As long as he agreed. Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded. He didn't force it anymore. As the saying goes, there will always be a way when the time comes. When the time comes, there will naturally be a way. After a long conversation between the two of them, Yu Qianqiu arranged everything that needed to be arranged in the ruins of God and left without any worries for the time being. In the following journey, he went back and forth between the human world and Utopia to deal with the matter of gathering people to refine pills. Now that he had the final say in the entire human world, there was almost no resistance when it came to matters in the human world. After returning to the World Chamber of Commerce, he was immediately questioned by Wei Chuanqiu. However, Yu Qianqiu had a way to get away. He only said that he had an appointment to discuss the matter regarding the demon core. Although Wei Chuanqiu was clamoring, she had no temper and could only let him leave. In the eyes of outsiders, the business of the World Chamber of Commerce was still miserable. Yu Qianqiu walked around the deserted hall downstairs a few times and found that there was not a single customer. He didn't think much of it, but when Jing Yuankong heard that he was here, he quickly found him in the hall and said bluntly, "It's fine if the business is a little lacking, but it's not good if the business is broken. No matter what, we have to keep it going. Otherwise, it'll be too weird if we don't do anything in the psychedelic immortal city." Yu Qianqiu thought that it made sense. He casually placed some immortal herbs for Jing Yuankong to arrange, looked around and asked, "Where did Yu Nantian go?" He should still be wandering around the psychedelic immortal city gathering information. He should be back a little later. Jing Yuankong looked outside the door and asked, "Should I call him over?" "No need, go do what you need to do." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and walked straight out of the World Chamber of Commerce. Jing Yuankong smiled bitterly. He couldn't think of anything to be busy about. The Wangutong branch was bustling with people. Compared to the World Chamber of Commerce, the difference was like heaven and earth. After hearing that Yu Qianqiu had arrived, Wang Yi personally came out to welcome him. The two of them sat down in the back hall. "I don't see Miss Wan Ling. Could she have returned to Myriad Saint's palace?" Yu Qianqiu looked around and asked casually. She went to watch the ranking conference." Wang Yi smiled and said, "Did Sect Master you come here specially to find her? I can think of a way to contact her and get her to come back as soon as possible." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Even though his World Chamber of Commerce didn't go to the ranking conference, he wanted to go and broaden his horizons. Unfortunately, Heartless Palace kept a close eye on him. It really wasn't convenient for him to run around. Regretfully, he shook his head and said, "That's not necessary. I'm here to ask how the purchase of beast cores is going." Wei Chuanqiu couldn't keep fooling around. Since he came up with this excuse, he had to bring something back to report. That was why he came here. "I've already purchased more than 500 and was about to send it to World Chamber of Commerce. I didn't expect Sect Master you to grace us with your presence." Wang Yi took out a storage bag and handed it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu injected his divine sense into it and put it away. He was about to leave when Wang Yi, who had been observing him, interrupted first and said, "I wonder what gift Sect Master you has prepared for Immortal Emperor?" "Gift?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned and asked suspiciously, "Why would you give a gift out of the blue? Doesn't Sect Master you know?" Wang Yi said strangely, "Immortal Palace will hold a grand wedding ceremony for Immortal Emperor and Immortal Monarch Ji Wu in a year. No, I should call her Immortal Empress now. Immortal Palace will hold a grand wedding ceremony for Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress Ji Wu in a year." A few days ago, Immortal Palace announced to the entire Immortal World that they will invite all the sect masters of the Immortal World to gather at Immortal Palace to congratulate them. After saying that, he observed Yu Qianzhou's expression and was slightly puzzled. However, Yu Qianzhou really didn't know about this. To be exact, he didn't have time to know about it. After hearing Wang Yi's words, he couldn't help but be a little absent-minded. He didn't know if Immortal Crocodile Monarch had leaked the matter of him touching Ji Wu's butt. If one day Immortal Emperor Jin Tai heard about it, then he would be doomed. At least, he would have no place in the Immortal World. Oh. Yu Qianzhou scratched his head and said perfunctorily, "This matter. See, I almost forgot about it. So, I have a headache thinking about the gift for Immortal Emperor. I don't know what to give." He pretending. "How could you forget about such a big thing? You are clearly from the Immortal Palace. It doesn't matter if you give a gift or not, so I didn't take it to heart at all." Wang Yi probed a little and smiled, thinking he knew what was going on. That's true. The Immortal Emperor's wedding is not an ordinary wedding. He is the supreme of the Immortal World. I really have to think about the gift. Just as the two were talking about the wedding of the Immortal Emperor and Ji Wu, one of the parties involved was helpless. The Immortal Palace shone brightly in the sky, and below it was the dazzling Crystal Palace. In the courtyard, Lu Yanqing carefully accompanied Ji Wu, but Ji Wu looked up at the Immortal Palace floating in the auspicious clouds with a frown. At first, the Immortal Emperor gave her a 1-month deadline to consider the marriage. After the 1-month deadline, the Immortal Emperor came again to interrogate her. Ji Wu naturally found an excuse to refuse. However, as Yi Xuejun expected, the Immortal Emperor really lost his patience and took a hard approach. But to Yi Xuejun's surprise, the Immortal Emperor captured him on the spot and used him to threaten Ji Wu. He once again gave Ji Wu a deadline to think about it. The consequences of refusing again, the Immortal Emperor's actions were clear. Yi Xuejun would be the first to suffer. After some consideration, Ji Wu had no choice. She also knew that she could not escape the Immortal Emperor's control. Most importantly, why should Yi Xuejun be implicated? She had no choice but to agree to the Immortal Emperor. However, she still held a glimmer of hope and made a final effort to delay. She could marry, but she had to have a year to adjust her emotions. Otherwise, she would not be able to accept the reality of being forced. At this point, the Immortal Emperor naturally had no reason to force her. Besides, for him, what was the difference between a year and a snap of the fingers? So he agreed to Ji Wu and ordered people to send a message to the entire Immortal World on the spot. This was to force Ji Wu to have no room to regret. However, a few days passed and Ji Wu still did not see Yi Xuejun being released. She could not help but wonder if Yi Xuejun had been killed. Today she had made up her mind. If she did not see Yi Xuejun return, she would not hesitate to break into the Immortal Palace and fall out with Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Lu Yanqing stood quietly behind Ji Wu. Her mood had not completely calmed down. Even in her wildest dreams, she didn't expect that her sudden decision would cause her to witness something unimaginable. She was by Ji Wu's side and witnessed the entire process of Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's forced marriage. She didn't expect that these high and mighty characters, who were rarely seen by ordinary people, would have such a face. Immortal Empress, let me play the guqin for you," Lu Yanqing said behind Ji Wu. Ever since she was brought here, Ji Wu would ask her to play and sing almost every day. However, since Yi Xuejun was taken away, she did not ask for it anymore. Immortal Empress? Don't mention this in front of me in the future. Ji Wu looked at the sky with some confusion and murmured, "Lu Yanqing, Lingfang Valley must be beautiful." Lu Yanqing responded subconsciously, then her whole body shook. She suddenly looked up at Ji Wu's back in horror. How did she know about Lingfang Valley? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.